Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm, and you are watching first part of What If Naruto Became a Devil to Protect Humankind. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe to this channel. And for more exclusive and spicy content, follow me on Patreon. Link is in the description below. And now, wasting no time, let's start the story.
At night, six figures were seen leaping from rooftop to rooftop in a silent night at a speed that is unfit for a human. Each of the six figures wore a black trench coat and black undergarments, and their faces were hidden by white masks with symbols resembling swords on their foreheads. The words on the back of their trench coats were the only thing that separated them. The figure with the word, Kiva, on the coat asked, "How far is the target, the fool?" The fool responded in a neutral tone, "2 more blocks. The target is moving quite fast. If we keep moving with this speed, there is a chance that we may lost him." Possibility? 30–40%? It seems we have no choice. Kabuto, you go first and try to slow him down. We can't let a dead apostle running around and turn people into the dead in this place. The fool. Give Kabuto direction. Wizard. Create some flame clones and send them to the target. Ozu and Ajito. Prepare to launch the attack. We need to finish this quickly or else we will be late for school on our first day. Now I really regret not taking the offer of help from Arcude-chan and Altrude-chan. Kiva sighed deeply. You better not take any injures or else you will be given earful scolds from Yoko as well as them. Kabuto whispered softly, "Cast off clock up," before literally disappearing due to his extreme speed. Rias Gremory was simultaneously astonished and perplexed. As a devil herself, she had experienced a lot of odd things in her life, whether they were pleasant or not, but this time she wasn't sure how she should react. Now she stood in a very small town, big enough by her standards to be called a small city. The people in her immediate vicinity appeared extremely joyful and even began to celebrate. Despite the town appearing to have recently experienced a war, she also observed that many of them were dressed in civil attire, but many also wore shinobi-style clothing with a band featuring a leaf-like symbol. Lastly, she wasn't the only one who suddenly materialized. The curvaceous woman with violet and raven hair pulled back into a ponytail asked the redhead, "Bucko, where are we?" Next to her was a small girl with hazel eyes and white hair who was probably 15 years old. Her hair had a short bob cut at the back and 2 long bangs that reached past her shoulders and several loose bangs that hung over her forehead at the front. With a dejected shake of his head, Rias said, "I honestly don't know, Akeno. I only remember that I was trying to sleep since I just keep having a strange feeling and then I appear in this place. What about you, Kaneko-chan?" In her typical monotone, the small girl answered, "The same, Bucko." Akeno crossed her arms beneath her ample chest and said, "Maybe this is a dream. A shared dream is something not uncommon after all." Rias nodded sympathetically and attempted to touch a man who was walking by. To her amazement, her hand moved through him as though he were a ghost. When Akeno and Kaneko attempted to grab another passing man, the same thing occurred to them. Rias almost jumped when she heard a very familiar voice say, "A shared dream, nay? Interesting." It was a young woman of Rias's age, with violet eyes and a pair of red glasses, and black hair cut short and bobbed. "Sona Citri, what the hell are you doing here in my dream?" Rias yelled. "On the names of Mao, why even have to see you here? You do realize those were the same things I want to speak to you, don't you?" Sona said angrily, giving her a deadpan expression. Before Rias could say anything more, Akeno clapped her hands to draw everyone's attention. "It doesn't matter, Bucko, I think we should go to that tower over there. I just heard from a woman that the Yondaime, is going to give a speech to the citizen. If we go there, we may know something." 4 sets of bat wings emerged from their backs and they took off without saying another word. A man with spiky blonde hair, dressed in shinobi attire with a green vest and a long white coat bearing the words, "Yondaime Hokage," on the back, stood next to a red-headed woman holding 2 infants in front of the large crowd gathered in front of the tower. The blonde man named Minato addressed the crowd, saying, "Dear citizens of Konohagakure no Sato, I, Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime Hokage, want to speak with you." The crowd erupted in joy at his appearance. "As you know, tonight the Kyuubi no Kitsune had attacked our village, our beloved Konohagakure no Sato, and damaged our beloved village while killing our precious people. A monster attacked this place. It explains why there are so many places destroyed and many corpses outside the village," Rias said, flinching at the irate roar from the crowd and nodding her head towards the village's gate. Sona pushed her glasses up and thought, "That's strange. Why did a monster attack this place? There is no way a monster suddenly appears out of the blue and attacks this place unless they provoke it." "Agree," was Kaneko's contribution. "It's not our problem, Kaichu, Kaneko-chan," replied Akeno. "Just listening and we may know. At least now we know this place's name is Konoha." With a tinge of irony, Sona answered, "What a big discovery we found. But, tonight I and my lovely wife Kushina managed to seal away that beast's power into my lovely twin daughter, Natsumi and Narumi, while I sealed the soul into my son Naruto. And now, here I present my daughters, the saviors and the heroines of Konoha, Natsumi and Narumi." There were numerous cries of victory and triumph directed at the two babies, as well as rage directed at the name Naruto, which went unnoticed by everyone but not by the four individuals suspended in midair. "It seems this man did a good deed, nay?" Akano giggled into her hand. "He saved the village and now his children are heroines when they grow up. I have no doubt that these two will be treated like princesses or even more, like queens just like you, bucko." Rias snorted at her queen's comment. "At least they aren't betrothed to a womanizer like the Razor before they were born? I swear, I'll leave that fucking arranged marriage someday." With a hint of rage in her voice, Rias stated, "But still, that man just made a very big and foolish mistake. Although you're my rival, I still have to agree with you." Sona sighed and shook her head sadly. Announcing his son's status as the jailer of the monster's soul, there is a high chance that he will become the target for the angry citizens as well as people seeking revenge. Moreover, where is this Naruto? He should be near his parents as well as to be seen as a hero, since he is the one who holds and keeps the soul at bay. The surroundings began to change as if the Mao had heard Sona's query, and a few seconds later, everything was dark. XXX Frederick Zoller was furious. The only memory that remained after he awoke from his more than 50-year slumber was the moment when that the filthy vampire turned him into a monster known as Dead Apostle by sinking his teeth into his neck. He had been furious at the time because the monster had transformed him into this. He was a German hero in World War II who had killed 300 Soviet soldiers in 3 days. This creature. His body simply continued to deteriorate despite the superhuman strength and speed he was given, and he could easily meet his demise by turning into ash and disappearing entirely. But he never gave up or surrendered because of his pride as a Nazi soldier. He had to find a way to extend his life because of his pride. The answer? Blood. He quickly discovered that regularly consuming the blood of living things was the only way to stop and even temporarily reverse this degeneration. In light of this, animal blood was a good substitute for human blood, particularly the blood of virgins, whose blood cells were more pure before they had shared bodily fluids with others. However, human blood was still the most suitable for vampires' needs. He would always remember how it felt to drink his victim's blood for the first time. The sensation was so revitalizing, and at the same time, he felt his body start to heal. His strength seemed to have increased several times, and his reflex was now even quicker than he could have imagined. He thought he could defeat any god in less than 5 seconds. However, that blonde bitch who called herself Arcude Brunstude quickly erased that sentiment. He was easily forced to his knees by that bitch. He barely made it out, but it was pure luck. Those bastards appear just as he is getting strong enough to go hunting. He was unable to keep up with those sons of the bitch, particularly the bastard who was currently battling him, despite having superhuman strength, speed, and reflexes. Slam. Just 1 second ago, Kabuto was standing there when the tip of his bow staff slammed. The Dead Apostle tried to surprise Kabuto by slashing at him with the claws on his left hand while throwing a punch with his right. However, Kabuto simply leaned back and struck Frederick in the chest with the tip of the staff, causing the vampire to lose all breath. Frederick delivered a flurry of punches, but not a single one of them was able to hit the target. Kabuto slapped the staff at the temple of the carer, avoiding the pitiful roundhound kick. Son der Ha paragraph Mark Lin. "Stand still and let me kill you," roared the Dead Apostle. The vampiric impulse heightened his bloodlust, driving him to drink other people's blood to keep his body and strength intact. Crack. Kabuto broke Frederick's thigh bone with a horizontal swing and dislocated the Dead Apostle's right shoulder with a downward swing. "You talk too much," Kabuto remarked in a tone devoid of feeling. The Dead Apostle roared and rushed toward Kabuto, trying to use his claws to prod him. Frederick became enraged when he noticed that Kabuto didn't care to dodge and even gave him a mocking snort. How could that jerk have denigrated him? That bitch's son would be sorry to look down on him after seeing him. Kabuto cried out in pain as 4 humanoid flames rose from the ground and engulfed him before the claws could reach him. Kabuto could hear the disappointment in Ajito's voice without turning around. "It seems you don't need backup anymore, eh? You should be grateful that I handled him, Ajito," grumbled Kabuto. "This guy is a disappointment to Dead Apostle. He fought like a mindless prone and his skill is pathetic, which could be easily understood since he isn't a full vampire, more like in its earlier stage. But the odd thing is that he wasn't controlled by the parent vampire." Wizard appeared with his typical deadpan tone, asking, maybe the parent vampire was dead and he somehow broke free from the control of the parent vampire? Kabuto exhaled. That could be the best explanation for now anyway. Where are Kiva and the fool? Don't tell me those two went home and now are sleeping soundly while we did all the work? No worry, Kiva is now running for his life because Miss Blue managed to find him and she is punishing him for making her worried sick when he suddenly disappeared 2 months ago. The fool is recording it in order to use it as blackmail material in the near future, Ozu said with a shiver, and everyone else winced. This, after all, if you valued your life, you wouldn't want to cross a piss off Miss Blue. The words, "rude helps him," made Kabuto sigh aloud. Yeah, agree. So, who wants to deliver the finishing blow? Kabuto asked, nodding her head toward the screaming figure rolling on the ground after a few moments of prayer for their leader's safety. Agito stabbed the burning vampire in the head with a red saber. Without saying a word, the body turned to ash and flew away in the wind, and the screams were silenced. Ozu tried to suppress a yawn and said, I think we can call it a night. Tomorrow is our first day, so don't be late. On the way to their house, Kabuto complained, you should say that to Kiva, not us. XXX. Kawaii. He looks so cute. Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, and Sona found themselves standing in what appeared to be a hospital room once the darkness had passed. Now there was a wailing baby in front of them. He looked like a fox with 3 whisker-like marks on each cheek and blonde hair. A seal that appeared to be a whorl drawn in an odd ink was on his stomach. Rias would have snatched him up and given him a teddy bear hug if it hadn't been a dream. Sona, for example, had to hold back from squealing like a girl. A fox. Kaneko couldn't resist grinning a little. This child would have resembled a Nekomata if he had had a tail and cat ears, and a really adorable one at that. As Akeno giggled, he tried to envision the future appearance of this baby. Fufufu, he looks exactly like that man, and Fishcake is really cute for him. I wonder why he was left alone by his own parents. Moreover, why is this hospital so silent? Beside the crying, I haven't heard any other sounds? Sona was thinking loudly. Abruptly, the door opened, revealing a man wearing shinobi attire, a taka, hawk, mask, and a kunai in his hand. A furious man roared, You demon! You attacked my village and killed my family, now you will pay, and ran to the bed. Kaneko! Exclaimed Rias. The small, emotionless rook spun around and threw a punch at the man, but much to her and everyone else's dismay, it simply passed through him. Akeno attempted to use her lightning to fry the man, but the outcome was the same. A man wearing a black trench coat and black undergarments knocked the shinobi to the side just before the kunai could stab Naruto. A black mask and the hood of the coat covered his face. The man growled, What the hell are you fucking doing? Quietness. Do you con that as a demon? The Yondaime sealed it into an infant so we can finish his job and kill him, don't you understand? Quietness. With a cry and some hand seals Rias had never seen before, the shinobi created a huge orb of roaring flame that engulfed the silent man. Fine. If you decide to side with the demon, then I will kill you too. Kaden. Ga Kakia, no jutsu. He said. A shining sword with a blue handle emerged from the fireball and thrust through the shinobi's chest before he could turn to face Naruto. When the sword was pulled back, the man cried out in agony, ARKKK, and the silent man emerged from the fireball completely unharmed. The shinobi fell to the ground in his own blood after the silent man's graceful swing left a deep gash on his chest. With a very sadistic cackle, the silent man said, Sorry for the pain, but at night, Galatine is a little blunt, but it made your death really painful, nay? Akeno shivered and the space between her legs became damp. Akeno couldn't resist letting out her masochistic side and giggling in a perverse way, with a hint of lust and sadism in her voice. Fufufufufufufu. I think I'm in love now. Sona and Rias instinctively distanced themselves from the cruel queen of Rias. With a blank expression, Kaneko said, That masked man is screwed. The conversation was cut off by another scream. He was now on the verge of death, as evidenced by the sword impaled in his chest and the shinobi's fading signature. The shinobi now used his remaining strength to try to force the words out of his throat. Th to the hella or yo-you. Who am I? The masked man asked in a playful tone, just a passing through devil who walks the path of humanity. Remember that. The shinobi's suffering came to an end when the sword was thrust into his heart. Then the world around them went dark. Yawn. A boy with slightly shaggy brown hair and brown eyes wearing a muffler was told to cover your mouth, Wataru-kun. By a very attractive girl with white skin and brown hair and blue eyes. He held a small bookbag in his right hand and a violin case in his left. They were both dressed in the uniform of the Kuo Academy. Wataru said wearily, mentally cursing, Damn my comrades. The advice came from the girl who kept shooting magic missiles at me from 11 p.m. to 2 a.m. the next morning and then threw a tantrum this morning when she found out Yoko-chan snugging into my bed naked. They left early this morning because they knew this would happen. That is your punishment for making me worried sick. Okay, but seriously, you don't have to do it until 2 a.m., you know? Compared to Arcude-chan and Altrude-chan? What did you just say? Compare on what? I will show you I'm way better than those two apostle. Baka! Aoko yelled angrily as she stomped in the direction of the school gate. I even haven't finished my sentence, and why is she angry? Sigh, why can women be troublesome? Walking calmly to school, Wataru shook his head resignedly. Wataru had a lovely morning aside from attending school. Choosing to leave that hellhole with his true Tu-san and true Ni-san made him happy. He had endured a great deal of suffering, but at least he had found happiness in life. Wataru was so preoccupied that he didn't realize he had reached school until he heard some whispers. Look, it's Kiba-kun. Do you think you will go out with me? Wah, Hamejima-senpai always looks so gorgeous. Kaneko-chan is always so cute, she looks just like a kitten. It's Grammary-senpai. Grammary-senpai is coming this way. Wataru noticed a group of 4 students when he looked up. The first was a stunning bishoujo with long, fiery red hair, cyan eyes, and a voluptuous figure that many girls would kill for. The second was a stunning girl with long black ponytail hair and an athletic, well-proportioned body that could easily compete with the redhead or any of the best models. Following them was a small girl with gold eyes and short silver hair who gave the impression that she was walking on clouds. At least to Wataru. Wataru thought the attractive blonde boy at the end was the Kiba-kun. He had heard he was currently getting a lot of glares from the men while being surrounded by a small group of attractive girls. A group of school idols didn't usually hold much interest for Wataru, but something in particular drew his attention. Wataru sensed their signature and aura and thought, all of them are devils. Wataru was aware that devils made requests and or participated in raiding games to advance in status, gain strength, and avoid hurting people. Well, as long as they don't harm any humans, we can ignore them, or maybe we can form an alliance with them. On purpose. Some of them, mostly stray devils, still enjoyed killing humans for fun. He turned away, shrugged his shoulders, and went to retrieve his schedule. He didn't notice the odd glances the 3 women were giving him, but he did hear some murmurs that gave him some uncomfortable feeling. Who is that guy? I haven't seen him before. I don't know, maybe he is a new student. Kawaii. He looks so cute with that muffler. Maybe he isn't handsome as Kiba-kun or that cool-looking guy with black hair, but he is definitely hot. And it seems he can play violin, too. I wonder if he is single? Will he go out with me? What's up with all the girls treating me like a piece of meat? Wataru thought nervously as he was treated by the male in the same way as the blonde boy. What the hell? Another Casanova. Another one? 5 more, and now we have another one in the same morning. Life is so unfair. Why don't all of them just go to die? Wataru walked toward the school building and got ready for his first appearance, shaking his head and giving a small, weary smile that caused the woman to blush. XX Class 2D. Hello everyone, my name is Aozaki Aoko. I'm new in this place, so please take care of me for the time being. All of the male students in the class exclaimed, yes, our new student is a hot girl. XX Class 3B. Standing in front of the classroom was a young man with tan skin, long, wavy black hair that covered most of his forehead, and dark brown eyes that were occasionally obscured by his bangs. Then, using his right hand to point to the ceiling, the sun somehow started to shine on him for no apparent reason. My Oba-chan said this. Walking the path of heaven, the man who will rule everything, my name is, pointed to the sun, Tendo Soji. All of the girls exclaimed, Kya, he looks so cool, while the men treated Soji the same way they had when they first saw him, glaring at him and even plotting an assassination. XXX Class 3C. In his typical deadpan tone, a young man with brown shaggy hair whispered to his companion, why am I stuck with you? In a languid tone, his companion, a young man with dark blue hair, a neck strap MP3 player, and clip-on earphones resting on his neck, whispered, no idea, now stop complaining and get this over with. The blue-haired boy bowed, I'm Arizato Minato, it's a pleasure to meet all of you and I will be your care from now on. The boy with the brown hair bowed, my name is Soma Haruto, I'm pleased to get to know all of you. The woman exclaimed, yeah, we got for ourselves 2 good-looking boys, once more. XXX Class 3F. I'm Hino Eiji, said the adolescent boy with brown eyes and thick, untidy black hair that reached his shoulders. And I'm Sugami Shuchi. The young man said he had shoulder-length hair that was so dark that it could have been mistaken for black due to the predominant red dye. He also had kind, warm brown eyes. It's very nice to meet all of you. Since we are new here, so please take care of us. It was easy to predict the response. Wow, they're so funny and mature. XXX Class 3A Wataru thought to himself, there is nothing to worry about. Everything will be fine. Okay. Calm down Wataru, calm down. Wataru was quite anxious. The reason was that every student in Class 3A was staring at him. Why would Wataru be anxious about that? The answer was quite simple. Class 3A consisted of 2 she-devils with long black ponytail hair and red hair, and all of the students were female. More importantly, he was being treated like a piece of meat by Class 3A members and even his sensei, who was blushing, as well as a possible boyfriend, lover, chosen mate, husband, and other things that would be XXX rated for the sake of this story's safety. Wataru cleared his throat and spoke anxiously, gathering all of his courage before it vanished into thin air. Well, hello to all of you. Well, Wataru is my name, Wataru Kurenai Pendragon. Well, and if you'd like, you can call me Wataru. A quiet, well, even though I'm never as good at cooking as Soji, I enjoy playing and practicing the violin, making violins, and cooking. Also, well, other than those who don't maintain their instruments, I don't really dislike anyone. My goal is to make the best violin possible, one that could outperform all Stradivarius violins worldwide. Every time he saw his father's Bloody Rose, the violin's beauty always made him forget everything else and made him admire its beauty until someone snapped him out, Wataru said excitedly when discussing his dream. One more quiet. Did I just say something wrong? Wataru asked, perplexed. Wataru just made one of his most careless mistakes at that moment. He allowed the girls to see his bewildering face, which was incredibly adorable. Let's just say that chaos ensued, with the girls inundating him with inquiries. Kawaii, he's adorable, sensei, can I keep him? Where are you from? Upon what date is your birthday? May I have your phone number? What type of food do you enjoy? What kind of girl are you? Are you by yourself? Do you have a girlfriend? Are you going to marry me? What is the intended meaning of the last question? Wataru attempted to yell, but was utterly unsuccessful. After almost 10 minutes, the teacher finally calmed the class down and allowed Wataru to respond to all of the questions. Kurenai-san, please sit at the 5th seat from right to left of the 4th row. Wataru nodded, his typical weary smile causing the woman's face to flush, and he walked to his seat, noticing that it was in front of the red-headed she-devil and next to the black-haired she-devil with a ponytail. When he sat down, the red-headed and black-haired she-devils gave him a hand. Wataru-kun, welcome to Kuo Academy. I am Occult Research Club President, Rias Grammary. The red-headed she-devil said, it's a pleasure to meet you. I am Occult Research Club Vice President Himejima Akeno. The she-devil with black ponytail hair said, it's a pleasure to meet you, Wataru-kun. Wataru turned back to his notebook after shaking their hands and saying, likewise, Grammary-san, Himejima-san. Rias and Akeno frowned as they thought, he didn't react to my charm, and why can't I feel his signature and at the same time I can feel something as his body? A sacred gear? And why does he feel so familiar? Wataru's mind was racing, unaware of their thoughts, and he didn't give a damn about what his teacher said because he already knew most of it. In fact, he could easily get into Tokyo University with the highest score of 100/100s if he so desired. Wataru sighed and reflected, well, my first day wasn't so horrible after all. I just hope Root won't cause me any more problems. As though he was aware that his hope was misplaced. When the bell rang, Wataru sighed with relief. Although he didn't despise school, in fact, the school and library were like havens for an outsider like Hima. He found it annoying to hear everything he already knew. Although the Ninja Academy and this type of school had some differences, Wataru saw them all as being essentially the same. Teachers taught, students learned, practiced, and then took tests. The subjects were the only thing that seemed different to him, but since he was already familiar with the majority of them, boredom set in pretty quickly. An irritated Wataru thought, I should have made a blood clone and let it study for me. Wataru quickly left the classroom before any of his classmates noticed, shaking his head to get out of his daze as he made his way down the hallway to find the cafeteria to buy lunch or, if he was lucky, find his comrades. He couldn't help but marvel at the academy's architecture while he was still in his daze. He simply put himself in a trap that the Root had just thrown at him. How did I end up in the music room, Root? Oh well, at least I have a place to practice violin now, Wataru said, dismissing the question. Wataru placed his school bag on the ground and pulled out his breathtakingly gorgeous violin, Bloody Rose, the first and last masterpiece of his Tusan. The violin's left side bore a small inscription that read, Subite no ninjan wa ongaku desu. All humans are music. Stealing his nerves, Wataru raised his violin to his neck, placed his chin on the chin rest, closed his eyes, and focused on the memory of his first conversation with Yoko-chan. Play the violin version of Cantarella, Away from the Music Room. Let's see, I've finished bringing the papers to the principal. Buying Yura some snacks and Momo some tea now is a violin? Shinra Tsubaki's train of thought was interrupted by the wonderful sound of a violin coming from the music room where some female students were looking in from the outside. When she peeked inside, she saw a male student with brown hair and a muffler playing a violin without caring about anything around him. Despite her best efforts to fight back, her face now had a heavy blush when she saw the sight. Her mind kept trying to replace the image of the young man in front of her eyes with her crush, Kiba Yuto, but her heart made sure that Kiba's image vanished every time she tried. Eventually, her mind gave in and she started to see images of herself in a light violet ball dress, dancing with this young man in a large golden castle on a romantic night with a full moon. No. No. Bad Tsubaki. You like Kiba-kun. Not this young, handsome and cute. Wah. No. Snaps out of it. Tsubaki. Tsubaki shook her head angrily to get the images out of her head, but her body would not listen and she continued to stand outside the music room as her mind began to play a scene in which she and this young man sat under a maple tree with shiny red leaves on a cool autumn afternoon. Both of them wore long mufflers for two people, and she was smiling contentedly while he played the violin. End music. Wataru stopped with his signature Kurenai-style chord plucking and two last strokes, sighed contentedly, and put the violin back in its case among his many happy memories, all but two of which occurred during his first 10 years. Meeting Yoko was one of the most memorable because Yoko was the only person who had taught him many things that parents should teach their children as they grow up. After all, it appeared that his former parents had forgotten that they had a Masuko next to their two priceless Masumi. The sight of a lonely boy walking behind his contented biological family as if he didn't belong there was almost painful to all the villagers. Almost is the key word. Who, after all, would have such strong feelings about a demon reincarnation? And Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, the son of Yondaime Hokage? Quick flashback. Is that some sort of joke? There is no son for the Yondaime. What on earth do you believe you are? Before we skin you alive, demon, get out of here. End of flashback. Sadness, rage, grief, agony, starvation, and suffering. Every bad emotion and thing a child shouldn't experience. But the lonely boy had only experienced those. He had never had a home, but he had had one. Despite having a mother, father, and siblings, he had never had a family. He'd had nothing. No, he had only one item: I hope. Two strangers he had never met before offered him hope. Review, Naruto-kun. You are not useless, to be honest. I don't know why, but I know you're destined to make a positive impact on this world. The soul is the only thing that matters more to a human than the heart. I can see that your soul is resilient in spite of all the unpleasant things you have to go through. That is proof of what Sensei said, since no matter how strong you are, Gaki, you cannot improve the world without a strong soul. Until the day we meet again, keep your hope and make sure your soul will never be bent. End of flashback. All he had hoped for were love and acceptance, which are essential for all children. A tiny, feeble hope like a candle in the midst of a storm. The boy hoped even though he had been almost crushed numerous times. He had hoped even after he began to think of the carton box as his home. He had continued to hope even as the frequency of his mealsa, which had been leftovers from family meals or items from trashcansa, had increased. But in the end, fate had shattered the boy's hope into tiny fragments despite his many prayers and tears, as well as the wrath of the Lifestream goddess and the pleading of two counter forces. Review, Tu-san. You're an unappreciative brat. Dare you? How are you going to do that ninja training? This is how you pay us for giving you a place to stay and food to eat. But Tu-san, you promised, you ungrateful child, why don't you wait until the academy to learn? But Ka-san, I already report to your room and remain there. You will not have dinner. Get out of my sight now. End of flashback. We promise to train you when you attend the academy, so no worry. Tell a lie. We're family. Tell a lie. Those were all complete lies. Then that took place, the birthday of Snow, the last nail in the coffin and the last straw. Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, unofficially, vanished on that day. Wataru felt a sudden sense of dread creep up his spine before any negative emotions could come like a tidal wave and ruin his mood. When he turned around, he realized why. Now, a sizable group of girls stood outside the music room, their faces glowing and blushing with love, admiration, and even, in the case of a select few, lust. Their hearts were in their eyes. Hey, hi. What am I supposed to do in this circumstance? Leap out the window and flee. After all, this is the ground floor. Thank you. You're welcome. By the way, you should run as quickly as you can if you don't want to lose your virginity. I got it. As if his life depended on it. Wataru snatched up his violin case and book bag, leapt out the window, and ran before the girls could react. Then chaos erupted once more. "Oh my god, he looks so charming," was a common cry. "He's even more attractive than Tendo-kun and Kiba-kun. I've fallen head over heels for Kurenai-kun. Wait here for me. And, after my future spouse, lover, or boyfriend." After that, they either ran off in the hopes of catching up with their new, chosen boyfriend, lover, mate, husband, or sent the recording of Wataru's performance to their friends. In the meantime, at the cafe copyright, "You're right here, 2 omelette rice, omuraisu, and 2 sandwiches." A cheerful Eiji, who was now serving lunch to a group of second-year girls while standing behind the cafeteria's food stall wearing an apron, said, "Hino-kun, arigato." When the 4 girls got their lunches, they squealed, "Call me Eiji, please have a great lunch. Next orders are 1 kare raisu, curry rice, 2 onigiri, rice ball, and 1 hayashi raisu," Eiji said, waving at the girl before turning to face the cafeteria's cooks. "I appreciate your assistance." Eiji-kun, one of the 3 cooks, patted Eiji's back and gave him the dishes, saying, "You are truly a lifesaver." "Nobu-san, don't worry, I'm always happy to assist," smiled Eiji, and he turned to the girls waiting in front of him. "Your orders, have a great lunch." Haruto and Soji were eating lunch with Shuchi and Aoko while Eiji assisted the cafeteria staff. "You are aware that your lunch consists of donuts, aren't you?" Aoko gave Haruto a peculiar glance. "So, I need to replenish my energy as quickly as possible," a perplexed Haruto inquired, "and I can quickly regain my energy by eating something sweet." "You just consumed the 10th donut." It was pointless to argue about these things, and she knew that there was no way they could alter their lifestyle or their antics. "Never mind," said a resigned Aoko, who wanted to express her disassociation from them whenever she witnessed their antics. "Where is Wataru-kun now? He ought to have arrived 10 minutes ago," Aoko inquired. After finishing his kare raisu, Soji butted in, "I hope he isn't being pursued by a group of girls who want him to become their husband now." Change in scene. A restless Rias Gremory sat on the couch in the occult research club room. His words kept playing over and over in Rias's mind when she woke up from her dream. Just a transitory devil who travels humanity's path. A devil who stood on humanity's side was something she had never heard of before, but this man had declared that he walked the path of humanity in many people's eyes. The devil could be seen as a creature of greed and destruction of humanity. While this was not wholly untrue, there was one thing that was certain. The devil always tried not to harm humans intentionally, especially after the war between heaven and underworld. Afterward, that shinobi released a massive fireball from his mouth while making a number of hand signals, giving the impression that he belonged to the Phoenix clan. The sword came next. Rias, coincidentally, discovered the name of the man's sword this morning while reading a book about King Arthur and his knights. Galatine. The sister sword of Excalibur, the reborn sword of victory, was the sacred weapon held by Sir Gawain, a knight of King Arthur. It was a holy sword that the devil had used in her dream. Kurenai Pendragon Wataru, a new student, came next. She couldn't feel his signature when she first saw him. She knew he was there, but she couldn't sense anything, as if he didn't exist. The Pendragon part was also a stretch, since not many people had King Arthur as a last name. Then, as she shook his hand, she experienced an unidentified, familiar sensation that was all too familiar. It simply liked, just liked. Liked that baby. Naruto. Could it be that Wataru and Naruto were one, or that Naruto and Wataru were related in some way? Other than that emotion, they had nothing in common. Rias rubbed her forehead, sensing that a huge headache was rapidly approaching. "Bucko?" You appeared to distressed. Rias sighed as she looked up to see her queen sitting down in front of her. "Yes, Akano, last night, it was the dream. I'm still bothered by it, and Kurenai-kun's familiar feeling as well. I simply can't make the connection. It's really perplexing." Outside the clubroom, they felt a sudden surge of demonic energy. The 2 girls ran out to investigate without saying anything, and what they saw was unlike anything they had ever seen. Returning to Wataru. "Awesome. Now, where am I?" After escaping from the fangirls from hell, Wataru found himself standing in front of what appeared to be an old building. What caught his attention were 2 signatures belonging to Rias and Akano, as well as another signature that he could tell was suppressed by some sort of seal. As he was about to sneak inside to investigate, a large purple flame erupted from the ground, and when it extinguished, a frightening-looking demon appeared in front of him. It had a black, bulky figure with many bones that protruded from its torso, and it had numerous blades stuck on its arms. The demon hurried to Wataru right away, and if his instinct hadn't kicked in, the blades on its arms would have impaled him. Sadly, he was unharmed, but his shirt and blazer now had 2 large gashes on them. Awesome. How can I now return to class wearing this attire? I had to finish this quickly without paying any attention. Wataru grumbled as he leapt out of the demon's way when it rushed at him once more. Wataru braced himself by mentally reciting a line he had uttered thousands of times. Follow along. Prana poured into Wataru's body as his magic circuits exploded. Wataru's mind was filled with images of swords, but he quickly narrowed his focus to one unique blade with an ultimate technique that had attained the level of one with pure godlike skill. Despite being a fake that appeared identical to the untrained eye and defying common sense in terms of length, Manahoshi Zao's Bichu AoE blade, which was more than 5 shaku long and 150 centimeters long with a blue handle, materialized in his hands. Wataru used this technique in a real battle for the first time, strengthening his legs with prana. His legs moved into the stance almost instinctively, and his arms performed the technique he had practiced vigorously with the slim hope that one day he would have replicated it perfectly. Wataru put all of his effort into a single swing, praying that there would be no opening in the technique or else there would be a bloody mess of Kurenai Pendragon Wataru on the ground under the demon's feet. A technique that, through sheer skill, even reached the kaleidoscope, the second magic of the greatest troll of all worlds. At least in Wataru's eyes. Kischer Zelrecht Schweinord saw 3 swings completed simultaneously, and 3 slashes arrive from 3 different directions by momentarily using the multidimensional refraction phenomenon to transcend speed, dexterity, feints, and many other elements. While the third slash simultaneously decapitated the demon, the first and second slashes sliced through the demon's body from both shoulders to the waist, causing black blood to spurt out. Wataru whispered, "Heiken." Sabama Gashi. The demon's body parts dropped to the ground, burst into black flame, and vanished into thin air. Sabama Gashi is a fabled technique used by the legendary swordsman Kojiro Sasaki, who is said to have been able to cut down a swallow in midair. It involves 3 simultaneous arching blades closing on the enemy from all sides, creating a prison that prevents any chance of defense or evasion. Although it may not be a noble phantasm, its power could even surpass that of servants. After dematerializing the sword, Wataru let out a little sigh and removed his shirt and blazer to figure out how to fix the clothes. Although his body wasn't particularly muscular, it was well built and he even had 6-pack abs, but there were things on it that many people couldn't imagine. Wounds. His body was covered in numerous scars, one of which stretched from his left shoulder to the right side of his waist on his back. A ledim on the loose. That's odd. Why would this world see a ledim? Unless, Wataru thought aloud, but before he could respond, a hole formed on his head, and from the hole, Wataru-kun. And a girl with dark violet eyes and long blonde hair fell out, causing Wataru's face to get trapped in her impressive breasts, causing him to blush intensely. She was wearing a paper fan, a pink lace parasol, a pale pink mop cap with a thin red ribbon and smaller ribbons tied on her accessories and hair tips, and a purple Chinese-style tabard with various trigrams over a pale pink Western-style dress. Yukari-chan, sputtered Wataru while trying to get out of her suffocating hug. Give me a break. Airne need air. Moo, isn't it a pleasure to see me again? With a childish pout, Yukari released Wataru from her embrace. Yeah, I'm content. It's simply that's what I believed. You know how boring it is to maintain the barrier between worlds? And it's really tiring to stop Kato Teme from stealing treasures. All I want to do is hug my Wataru-kun, and go to sleep. Wataru didn't like how dramatic Yukari's statement was. Wataru grinned wearily and raised his hands to stop the blonde, saying, Okay, I get the idea, but really, why are you here? I assumed you would arrive tonight rather than right now. I was chasing that ledim you just killed a few minutes ago, Yukari complained, puffing her cheeks from its cave. Kato Teme enticed it into a tiny opening that I neglected to seal. I only, accidentally, broke a small old vase that he referred to as treasure, so he did that to irritate me. A dumb old vase. Why would anyone care? Wataru sighed a little and shook his head resignedly. These two will be my death in the future. At least now Yukari-chan spends more time working, not just sleeping and messing with others. Wataru thought wearily as he considered the relationship between Kato Daiki and Yakumo Yukari, which was strained but not hostile after countless attempts. Yukari-chan, check out the time. I'm having a snack now, Wataru-kun. See you later. You owe me one for helping you tonight, so keep that in mind. Yukari opened a gap and intervened before Wataru could say anything. Her unusual gleeful expression could only mean one thing. Disaster. Wataru turned to face the old building and let out his N+1 sigh. All right, Hamejima-san and Gremory-san. You two are free to leave now. Sitri Kaichu and Shinra Fuko Kaichu, this also applies to you. Akeno and Rias earlier, what on earth is that, Mao? Akino's heart clenched when she saw the gashes on Wataru's shirt and blazer, but she was relieved to see that Wataru was unharmed. Akeno exclaimed as they both witnessed the demon appear and charge at Wataru. I honestly don't know, Akeno, Rias remarked, still taken aback by the unidentified demon's appearance, until she noticed a long blade materialize in Wataru's hands. Rias thought to herself, a second sword birth? No, I can't feel any demonic energy in that blade, some kind of spell. But then she was shocked by what she saw. Wataru charged at the demon and killed it in a single swing with 3 slashes coming from 3 directions before she could blink. Whoa, 3 cuts after the demon vanished into thin air, Rias exclaimed, with 1 swing. This unidentified method alone demonstrated to her that Wataru was extremely skilled with a sword, and she began formulating a plan to elevate him to her peerage before Sona could even see him. Akeno jokingly remarked, Era, Yuto-kun's gonna be interested in that technique if he see this. She then licked her lips lustfully upon seeing Wataru's body, causing Rias to blush, and it seems Wataru-kun has a quite delicious body, fufufu. Before Rias could say anything, a gap opened above Wataru, and a girl with blonde hair fell from it, burying Wataru's head in her impressive breasts strangely. Rias became irritated with the blonde, and her eyes narrowed when, much to her dismay, she discovered that this girl was quite beautiful and that, although the blonde's breasts weren't larger than hers, she was still very well endowed. Her mind's gears began spinning quickly to find a way to counter this threat, and then her eyes widened. All right, Hamejima-san and Grammary-san, you two are free to leave now. Sitri Kaichu and Shinra Fuko Kaichu, this also applies to you. Wataru's call interrupted Rias's train of thought, and she now realized that she had been so absorbed in her thoughts that she had failed to notice the blonde girl's departure. Wait a minute, how did he know we are watching? And Sona's here too? She asked. Now, bucko, what should we do? Wataru's call also surprised Akeno, so she asked King. Rias sighed, we have no other choice, Sona and Tsubaki. How did he fare? That. Tsubaki stammered, when she and Sona sensed a surge of demonic energy near the old building. They hurried off to investigate, only to discover something unexpected. A male student wearing a muffler used a very long blade with a very powerful technique that created 3 slashes with a single swing to dispatch a strange-looking demon. And it was the same male Tsubaki had seen playing violin in the music room. I sense no demonic power in that blade, so I can only assume that he used a sword technique that demands a top-notch swordsmanship or some kind of strange spell which can multiply or copy the slash, Sona said thoughtfully, pressing her glasses to her face. Sona mentally added the last part, and he can become quite a powerful addition to my peerage. Her face then blushed heavily when she saw Wataru's nude upper half, and she frowned when she saw a blonde girl who had fallen from a gap and was now suffocating Wataru with her impressive breasts. As she looked at Tsubaki, she was surprised to see her queen gnashing her teeth comically and had some large knots form on her forehead. After all, every member of Sona's peerage was aware of Tsubaki's crush on Kiba Yuto, so it was truly priceless to see Tsubaki exhibit these kinds of reactions when it didn't concern Kiba. Tsubaki. Sona's queen stumbled a little before straightening up after snapping out of her state. Why yes, Sona-sama, yes? Sona said, staring blankly at her queen. Don't you feel envious? Whoa. No, said Tsubaki while waving her arms frantically in a very comical way. Why would I experience jealousy? I can't possibly feel envious of a stranger that I barely know. I. Tsubaki and Sona both jumped at Wataru's voice before she could finish speaking. Okay, Grammary-san and Hamejima-san. You two are free to leave now. Sitri Kaichu and Shinra Fuko Kaichu, this also applies to you. Along with Wataru put on his damaged shirt and blazer and waited patiently in a thick silence until all 4 of the girls emerged from the old building, and behind its corner Wataru could see the calculating look in Rias's and Sona's eyes, but he also understood that they were all tense and a little on guard. Well, it looks like they're planning something, at least they don't seem hostile, but I still need to be careful about this. Grammary-san didn't react when she heard my surname was Kurenai this morning, so that means she might not be aware of what happened between my 2-san and her clan in the past, or she's very good at hiding her reaction. I'm not sure if Sitri-san knew about this or not, since according to what my father told me, the surname of Serafal is Sitri, so I have to be extremely careful with her. Wataru thought calculatingly he and his comrades had just arrived yesterday, so he didn't want to deal with Searsex and Grafia at this time. If he made a mistake, he could only hope that Alaya Chan's and Gaia Chan's trick would cover his trail. Wataru bowed his head slightly and spoke in a courteous but slightly acerbic tone. So what honor do I have to come across 4 such stunning women here? This brought blushes on Sona's and Tsubaki's face while Rias and Akeno giggled with a small blushes. Or perhaps I should say, devils? What is your favorite? All 4 she-devils instantly went on guard when the word, devil, was uttered. Sona spoke cautiously. And what are you? Why am I unable to sense you? And since we haven't met before, how do you know that my last name was Citri rather than Shitori and Tsubaki? Unfortunately, the school bell signaling the end of the lunch break rang before she could get any answers. Wataru chuckled dryly and said, well, it seems your questions have to wait for a while. Grammary-san and Himejima-san, please tell sensei that I will come back to class a little late. I'll need some time to adjust my blazer and shirt regarding your inquiries. Citri-san, my friends and I will meet with you after school tomorrow, and I will do my best to respond. Let me know where we should meet tomorrow, and I'll be there. Grammary-san, your group is welcome to attend as well. A group? Riyadh raised her left eyebrow in agreement. You have a peerage, don't you? Anyhow, I'll see you all later. Wataru waved to the group before picking up his violin case and book bag and heading out to change, leaving a group of cautious but considerate she-devils in his wake. At the Kurenai Tendou Soma Arisato Hino Sugami household that night, the scene changed. Not far from the Kuo Academy, in the dojo of a large Japanese-style home. Dude, it's finally finished. But Gaia-san, may I ask you why it is necessary to use lead paint instead of regular paint? Eiji exclaimed after 2 hours of meticulously painting a very large magic circle with 5 smaller magic circles surrounding the large circle, not to mention an hour of waiting for Minato and Wataru to design and construct the magic circles with chalk. Lead paint has the potential to be highly toxic. A very young woman in a knee-length black dress with armpit-length black hair and golden eyes responded without looking back, kneeling close to the big circle to see if anything was wrong. If you're not careful, a lot of things can affect magecraft, particularly formalcraft in this case. As you are already aware, lead paint contains lead, or more specifically, lead-1 chromate and lead-2 carbonate, in addition to some chalk and silver powder that I added to the paint. They are highly conducive to both prana and chakra. What? Before Eiji could finish, Gaia interrupted him. I thought we would only use prana. Just to be safe, according to Wataru-kun, chakra is made up of what he refers to as chakra cores, so while it differs from OD, it is somewhat similar. The knife will sharpen and become unstable until it is broken. For instance, if it is reinforced with a lot of prana, the knife will become sharper if you use a lot of chakra to reinforce it, but it will eventually get duller and duller. Eiji nodded. I understand now. If something goes wrong, you plan to use chakra to stabilize the circles, right? Yes, as I mentioned earlier, using chakra to keep the gap at bay is also safer than using prana because it can stabilize things. Gaia slowly rose from her kneeling position and gave the circles one final glance before turning back to Eiji and saying, okay, the paint is dry enough. Everything is prepared. Eiji, go call everyone in. Soji in his typical gray hakama, Haruto in his white t-shirt and brown pants, Yukari in her typical dress without her parasol and paper fan, a young man with disheveled black hair and a cheerful expression that irritated everyone around him, and, lastly, a stunning girl wearing a dark red dress with a yin-yang symbol in front of it, very dark blonde hair tied into 2 ponytails, 2 fox ears on top of her head, and 9 swaying foxtails covered in dark red fur. Are all of you aware of your responsibilities? Another woman who resembled Gaia but had crimson eyes and silver hair questioned the group. Elia, I have a question. Why must I collaborate with her? While Yukari was giving him a savage glare, the young man with the untidy black hair pointed at him with a frustrated look. To respond to your inquiry, Kato Daiki. Elia's voice grew progressively colder. First, you already know where Wataru-kun's world is, but your power still has some limits since your power isn't second magic and I don't want to take any unnecessary risks. And second, if you don't help, I can guarantee that you will never even lay an eye on any treasures, let alone hunting them. Am I clear? Yes, indeed. Take action. Take action. Take action. Yukari began to jump up and down with a very childlike glee after hearing the final line. No more working overtime. Don't worry about Kato Teme anymore. Additional time spent with Wataru-kun. More Ida. What on earth are you? Everyone turned to see a humanoid figure wearing a long black trench coat with a hood, black gloves, and black combat boots. Underneath the figure's face was obscured by a black mask, and the hood cast a shadow over it. You must change your behavior. Yukari-chan, by the way. I am, your Wataru-kun. It seems that Gaia's gift really works, the figure warned. Wataru-kun. Yukari and the kitsune, in some way shocked, said, What are the new clothes? How am I unable to sense you? I can still feel some traces of your signature even though your Avalon's aura is hiding it, but now I feel nothing at all. Like you don't even exist. I take it that you are already aware of my noble phantasm, for someone's glory? Said Wataru in a very calm manner while pointing to his clothes. This is the altered version of Gaia-chan's gift, for someone's glory. Basically, it's still the same as the original version. He snapped his finger, and a black fog appeared around him. But when I use both this version of For Someone's Glory and Avalon's aura simultaneously, I can completely hide both my presence and my signature. Additionally, it is resistant to a few weak attacks. Furthermore, more crucially, a very dark blue sword appeared in Wataru's right hand with an odd movement of his wrist, and Haruto let out a startled cry. Hold on, isn't it? However, I considered, yes, Haruto. This is erendite. The lake's unfailing light. I can now use erendite and For Someone's Glory simultaneously thanks to this altered version of the song. However, the disadvantages are that I can no longer use Knight of Honor and For Someone's Glory simultaneously, and using erendite and For Someone's Glory costs me a significant amount of prana, not to mention that I can only use For Someone's Glory for disguise for an hour every day with this version. Where are Shuchi, Minato, Aoko-chan, and Gaia-chan, by the way? They are already patrolling tonight, and Gaia is enclosing the house with a bounded field and a barrier. We don't want to draw undue attention right now, let alone at our meeting tomorrow, because what we're going to do will ultimately result in a huge spike in power, Soji stated bluntly. Hey, I had previously stated that I had no other option. Furthermore, I lack your clock-up ability to simply charge and disappear without being noticed. Wataru objected. All right, let's just end this now, Soji grunted. You had better finish this quickly because this is one of the few days I don't have to be on patrol and I want to sleep for a long time after this. We don't want your impulsive need for sightseeing to waste my prana. Yoko. Begin directing your chakra into the circle. Alaya nodded, and the kitsune began to contribute. A few seconds later, her circle began to emit a red light and spread to the larger circle. Yukari, create an opening in the center of the big circle. Open a tiny entrance to Wataru's former world, Daiki, but make sure it stays inside the opening, don't let it leave. Yukari opened a gap to what appeared to be a pitch-black dimension after exchanging venomous glares, and Daiki waved his hand in the direction of the gap, turning it from pitch-black to dull gray. All right, this is the most difficult part. You three, Yoko, Yukari, and Daiki, maintain the gap and make it as stable as you can. Haruto, start reversing the time in the gap using the time ring I gave you. Get ready to create a time paradox. Soji, don't mess it up because even 0.5 seconds sooner or later can have negative consequences and get Wataru-kun stuck in the gap if he enters. Without uttering a word, Soji began to pour demonic and prana energy into Haruto's body as he pulled out a blue ring, placed it on his right middle finger, and pointed it in the direction of the gap. Please, time, take off. When Alaya noticed the change in the gap, she yelled at Yoko. The dull gray dimension in the gap began to distort. Sparks began to shoot out of it, and a spike of energy flared up at Soji's circle. Yoko. More chakra. The gap is becoming unstable due to Haruto's excessive power. We must stabilize it right away. As soon as Alaya finished speaking, the red light emanating from the large circle brightened, and the dojo began to tremble so violently that Wataru hoped bounded field and Gaia's barrier would be effective. Alaya's face was very focused as her mind focused on the gap. Meddling with time and reality was extremely dangerous. One mistake and the word, disastrous, couldn't even describe 10% of the consequence. There must be no mistake. Everything must be perfect. The sparks from the gap began to subdue, and the distortion speed increased. Sweats began to appear on Haruto's forehead as well as Daiki, and Yukari and Yoko looked a little tired. Haruto. Hold on, Soji. Right now, Alaya shouted. Please stop. Clock up. Wataru turned to Alaya as the distortion abruptly stopped and a flash of silver light appeared in the center of the gap, expanding into a portal. Wataru looked warily at the portal. You better give me a full explanation of the portal's mechanism after this, replied Wataru. Unfortunately, Alaya said, you know that I can't give you the full explanation since there are too many things related to true magics, not to mention Akasha-sama. Don't worry, though, I'll do my best to accommodate you, Wataru-kun. If you don't go save your former self, you won't see Yoko-chan again. Wataru turned to face the kitsune and smiled sympathetically, saying, hang in there, Yoko-chan. I'll rescue us both, that's a commitment. Yoko nodded and smiled affectionately at the young man who had won her heart. Good luck, Wataru-kun, and be safe. Wataru took a deep breath, closed his eyes, and leapt through the portal to his former world, or, more accurately, the past of his former world, with a single, crucial mission. Preserving his younger self, more specifically, his Naruto persona as Namikaze Uzumaki. Wataru opened his eyes to find himself standing in front of a door in an empty hallway of Konoha's hospital. Although he had many unpleasant memories of this place, he still felt a little nostalgic because he had first met his true To-san and true Ni-san there. However, before any memories could surface, he heard a voice in the room. You, demon, you killed my family by attacking my village, you will pay now. Wataru rushed into the room and saw a shinobi wearing a hawk mask running toward the bed with a kunai in his hand, using prana to strengthen his left hand and injecting some demonic energy into his muscles. Wataru backhanded the shinobi and caused him to crash into the adjacent wall. What on earth are you doing? Wataru was growled at by the man. Wataru merely remained silent as he gazed at the shinobi. You realize that's a demon? In order for us to complete his task and murder him, the Yondaime sealed it into a baby. You don't get it? Wataru remained silent as he saw a blue-handled, gleaming sword in his mind. All right. I will also kill you if you choose to support the demon. Kaden. Jutsu no ga Kakia. Wataru was engulfed by a huge orb of roaring flame that the shinobi released with a cry and a few hand seals. Continue on. He read its concept, the maker's thought, the expectation, the moral, the faith, and the origin itself, and the warm feeling returned as prana filled his system once more. It was an equal shadow cast by the actual object, which is why it was called projection. It didn't matter how good the work was. If it had been done, it would have been easy to replicate. Galatine. The reborn sword of victory appeared in his right hand. Once owned by the Lady of the Lake, it was not as well known as a holy sword and was seldom mentioned because its legend was obscured by King Arthur's holy sword. Its greatest power was revealed at noon, when the unparalleled sharpness of its edge was revealed, slicing cleanly through the enemy Saracen soldier Priamus's shield and chainmail. With a simple thrust, the sword passed through the shinobi's chest, and thanks to for someone's glory, Wataru was completely unharmed after drawing back the sword, which caused the shinobi to cry in agony. With a graceful swing, Wataru used Galatine to make a large gash on the shinobi's chest, causing him to fall to the ground covered in his own blood. I apologize for the pain, but Galatine is a little blunt at night, which is why your death was so agonizing. Wataru let out a very sadistic cackle for some strange reason, and when he saw that the shinobi was attempting to stand up, he thrust the sword into his lung and impaled him to the ground. Who the th to the devil and you. With all of his remaining strength, the shinobi attempted to force the words out of his throat. Who am I? Just a passing through devil who walks the path of humanity, Wataru remarked with a laugh. Remember that. And the shinobi's suffering came to an end as the sword was pulled back and thudded into his heart. Wataru pulled out a small piece of paper with a magic circle on it, channeled a tiny bit of demonic energy into it, and slapped it onto the Copresi's chest. Then, with a single word, ignite, the Copiars burst into flame, leaving only ash. Wataru tried to control his anger by gently scooping his younger self into his arms as he turned his head toward the bed and watched his one-year-old self cry. He felt angry that his mother and father had forgotten about him and left him alone in this place. Wataru comforted her, saying, "It's okay now, young me, nobody is going to harm you, at least for the time being." After a few minutes, the younger version of himself stopped crying and gave him a curious look. You know what, my younger self? Holding my younger self in my hands feels a little strange, but holding a child in my hands is incredibly calming, Wataru said, mostly to himself because he didn't think his younger self could comprehend. I wish one day I can have a big happy family. He then began humming a soft lullaby melody that Yoko had hummed when he was 4 years old, and he now realized why he had felt so familiar with the melody at that time. Wataru said solemnly as he gently placed his younger self on the bed. Young me, this is the first and possibly last time you've heard a lullaby. Wataru chuckled dryly and painfully, saying, well, this is the farewell, young me. I doubt that our former father and mother would batten at us even if we were attacked by an angry mob, which will be true in the future, so you should prepare for that, and never allow your soul to be bent or your hope to wane. With a bitter smile, Wataru stepped out, closed the door gently, and leapt into the portal after taking one final look at his younger self's sleeping form. Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki was spared in the official start of 10 Years of Hell. Rias blinked twice. She was drawn into this for the second time. As soon as she climbed into the bed, all hope of a restful, dreamless sleep was dashed when she and Akeno, Kaneko, and Sona found themselves standing in what appeared to be a small park from the 1800s on a somewhat chilly evening. This time, her group was added, which made a difference. Tsubaki? Why are you here? Sona said, her voice full of surprise. I'm not sure. Kaichu, where is this location? Why are Kaneko-san, Akeno-san, and Rias-sama also present? Sona's queen remarked after surveying the area. At this point, all I can say is that Tsubaki and I are in a shared dream, and I have no idea how we got into this. We are being drawn into this for the second time, Sona remarked. A second instance? Asked a bewildered Tsubaki. I will talk about it later, Sona said curtly, shaking her head. Then the snow began to fall. Everyone in their immediate vicinity began to leave the park, with the exception of a few children who persisted in wanting to play in the snow until their parents pulled them away. The snow continued to fall. Observe, Bucko Akeno said, there is only one man left. Rias and Sona noticed a familiar violin case on the man's lap. As they looked in the direction Akeno indicated, the man had black hair with brown highlights and black eyes, and he was sitting on a swing in a suit that included a plaid light blue formal jacket, a white shirt, a black tie, black pants, and black shoes. They then saw that he had a longing look in his eyes, as though he was anticipating something or someone. The snow continued to fall. The man was still sitting at the swing, his eyes still filled with longing, but he had a new expression on his face. A bitter, melancholy smile. What is he doing? Akeno asked. Waiting for something, or rather someone, Rias remarked, wondering why she recognized the man so well. The man's lips released a long sigh. Tsubaki's eyes widened as the man pulled out a gorgeous violin with a line carved into it while grinning bitterly. Subite no ninjan wa ongaku desu means, all people are music. Kaichu. Kurenai-kun's violin is the same one that the man is holding. Tsubaki spoke loudly, drawing everyone's attention right away. Kaneko even became alert upon hearing Tsubaki's words. Are you certain of that? Rias squinted when she heard Tsubaki added the suffix, kun, to Wataru's name, and Sona asked her queen doubtfully. 100% Kaichu. All people are music. Tsubaki firmly nodded. Not only does Kurenai-kun's violin resemble the one he used this noon, but it also has the same line carved into it. How do you know, too? When Akeno saw Rias asking in a menacing manner and glaring at the other queen with her malevolent eyes, she broke out in a cold sweat. So, you were aware of the rumor that a student was playing the violin in the music room, right? After getting nods of confirmation, Tsubaki continued. Well, Kurenai-kun was that pupil and I witnessed his violin performance firsthand while I was there. I have no doubt that the violin Kurenai-kun owns and the one the man is holding are identical. So, the man began to sing in a lovely voice before Rias could respond. The snow continued to fall. However, the man continued to sing despite the icy surroundings, channeling his emotions and thoughts into the tune. The snow continued to fall. Love, sadness, sorrow, and a faint undertone of treachery were all present in every word, note, and tone. The snow continued to fall. Unaware that the audience was now inadvertently approaching him, the man simply kept singing while stroking the line carved into the violin with his thumb. Not that he could have known them anyway. The snow continued to fall. The man grinned bitterly while looking up at the sky with the same yearning gaze, and Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, Sona, and Shinra could all sense the anguish and despair in his voice. The snow continued to fall. However, Rias and everyone else saw that another object had begun to fall. Tears. Even though the man's voice was now warped by his tears, he continued to sing despite the tears streaming down his face. The snow continued to fall. The man simply sobbed in silence. Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, Sona, and Tsubaki were still in a daze even though the man had stopped singing. The song was simply too lovely. No, even Kaneko could see that the word, beautiful, was insufficient to capture half of the song's essence. The song evoked so many different emotions that Rias was at a loss for words. The song was full of love, but it also contained sadness, despair, and a hint of betrayal. Then two magic circles appeared on the ground, one black and the other dark red, and two people came out of them. A 23-year-old man with brown eyes and neck-length auburn hair emerged from the red circle. He was dressed in a long red trench coat with black undergarments, shoulder guards, black combat boots, and cross-leather straps. He had a long red sword with a rapier's hilt around his waist. The second was a man in his early 30s who had black eyes and slightly long, messy black hair. He was dressed in a black formal suit, save for a gray shirt, a black tie, and a black trench coat. Although he didn't appear to pose much of a threat, Rias and her companion's instincts were screaming to stay away from him. When both of the newcomers bowed their heads, Rias's and everyone else's eyes widened. Kurenai-sama. Bucko, did they just say, Kurenai-sama? Akeno asked. Yes, Akeno. I heard it too, Rias remarked, taken aback by this as well. The only person who hadn't spoken since the beginning of the dream, Kaneko, said in her normally monotone voice, so he is a relative of Kurenai-senpai. Nevertheless, Rias and Akeno could see a trace of curiosity in their little rock. Sona pushed her glasses up and said, we can assume so for now, but Kurenai wasn't an uncommon name, so maybe it is just a coincidence. However, the voice of the man sitting on the swing interrupted their conversation. With a forced smile, the man said, Ah, Ji-kun, Kiri-kun. Why are you two here on this beautiful night? What did I say about you referring to me as Kurenai-sama? Simply use my name and omit the sama from it. They both nodded after a brief period of silence, saying, as you wish, Atoya-sama. Atoya sighed and opened his mouth to speak, but the auburn hair man spoke angrily before he could. Atoya-sama, did that harlot not show up? Atoya shook his head sternly, but his voice was sad. Don't call her like that, Ji-kun. To think that harlot and that damn gramarye, Ji-kun, added angrily before Atoya interrupted, but Rias and the others did not miss the gramarye part. Genesis. Don't refer to her that way. Otaya spoke in a commanding tone. But, the man next to Genesis said, stop it, Genesis. He then turned to face Atoya and said, Atoya-sama, please stop waiting, you've been waiting for almost 3 hours. She refuses to come. Atoya-sama, you are also aware of it. The snow continued to fall. A quiet moment. Atoya pulled out a picture and looked at it with a bitter smile on his face as tears began to fall again. Atoya remarked solemnly, it felt like I had finally found my other half. The first time I saw her, just being by her side makes me feel so warm, so cozy, so full. I couldn't deny that my other selfish motivation for enlisting our kingdom in the underworld civil war was to be close to her, even though my main goal was to ensure that the old faction wouldn't use people as weapons to win the conflict. To witness her grin, to fight alongside her, to keep her safe. The snow continued to fall. The day she declared her love for me as well, one could argue that that day was the happiest of my life. I believed I had at last found my soulmate. However, it appears that fate was adept at manipulating me. The snow continued to fall. A hollow chuckle. After 3 years I made the decision to pop the question to her on the day she declared her love for me, to inquire if she would grant me the privilege of marrying her. I made the best preparation I could afford, made certain that everything was flawless. However, but after that, the snow continued to fall. Then, as the picture hit the floor, Atoya began sobbing uncontrollably. However, after that, simply why, exactly, why did she do that? Why did she treat me this way? Me? If she didn't cherish me and no longer, then, why? Why did she not? Tell me, please, and I would allow her to go. Even it would hurt, and I would never prevent her from pursuing her happiness. The snow continued to fall. Was our affection only a lie? To her, am I merely a Pierrot clown? Kiri-kun shook his head and placed a hand on Genesis' shoulders, which Rias and everyone else could see were trembling with anger. Kuritsugu. No, Genesis. That harlot, I'll make her pay, I promise. Genesis snarled. Genesis, no, at least, not now, Kuritsugu said in a sorrowful tone as he approached a lifeless Atoya who was now gazing up at the sky with hollow eyes. He then placed the violin in the case and assisted Atoya in getting off the swing. Atoya-sama, as Kuritsugu concluded, 3 magic circles materialized on the ground, and the 3 individuals disappeared. Let's go home. The snow continued to fall. The footprints were all that remained after the picture was placed on the ground. So this Atoya's girlfriend broke up with him? Akeno broke the silence as usual. Tsubaki snorted, more like his girlfriend betrayed him. Sona remarked, from what we've heard, we can only assume so for the time being. However, there is one thing that perplexes me. He claimed to have included his kingdom in the underworld civil war. If this is true, why haven't I read about it? Rias shrugged and said, well, we're in a dream, it might just be an imagination. Do you think that if we shared a dream, we would envision the same thing? Sona deadpanned. Hardly, Rias acknowledged, but I still wonder who this girl was. From what I've seen and heard, it appears that Atoya was a Noblia, possibly even a Kinga, and that he genuinely loves this girl. He still loves her, at least somewhat, despite the fact that she betrayed him. Suddenly, a tiny wind blew the face-down photo toward Rias's group and flipped it up, as if the Mao had heard her. The 5 of them all reacted in the same way when they saw the picture. They went pale. Sona, isn't this still a dream? Isn't this merely fantasy? Rias had to shake her head and blink a few times to make sure what she saw wasn't a hallucination. Yes, Rias, this is still just a dream. Sona, who also found it difficult to believe what she was seeing now, said, but from what I read about shared dreams, they sometimes contain truth or half-truth or a hint of future. So is this true? Kaneko, who was now trembling a little, asked. I'm not certain, Sona whispered, but I hope it isn't, as both her and Rias's eyes continued to focus on the subject of the picture. The person was a stunning woman who looked to be in her early 20s, with matching eyes and silver hair that flowed all the way down to her back. Her hair was let down and ended in twin braids, with a long braid on each side and tiny blue bows at the ends. Rias and everyone else knew that face all too well. In fact, she would have recognized it even if she had been impaled by thousands of crosses. Which devils, after all, wouldn't be aware of the strongest queen, the silver-haired queen of annihilation, Sears's Lucifer the Red Satan's soon-to-be wife, and Rias's soon-to-be sister-in-law? Lucifuge Graphia. Then the scene was different. Swords. When the surroundings had finally changed, they saw swords for the first time. Now, the scene before them was a never-ending field of grass with numerous swords anchored in the ground like grave markers, all of which were illuminated by the setting sun. What is this location? Breathlessly, Rias exclaimed. It's so beautiful. After a few minutes to enjoy the view, Akeno discovered another surprise. Bucko. The swords are within reach. After hearing this, Rias and everyone else touched a sword right away, and they could feel the coldness of steel with their hands, Akeno said, touching a two-handed, golden greatsword with a blue jewel embedded in the hilt that boasted a magnificence and enormity possible only for weapons tended by inhuman hands. "Oh wow," was the only word that escaped Sona's throat as she touched what appeared to be a large axe sword carved from rocks. Meanwhile, Kaneko and Tsubaki were staring at a pair of red and golden spears with cautious eyes, while Akeno was eyeing a golden chain with a lecherous face. To believe that someone who exudes the same Yamato Nadeshiko aura as Himejima-san is a masochist will wonders never stop, man. When Rias's group turned around, they saw a young man with spiked blonde hair that was toned down backward. He was dressed in a high collar, sleeveless black shirt, black pants and boots, and black cloth covering his left arm and leg. "Who are you?" Sona cautiously inquired. If this young man was able to see her and everyone else, and if he was also aware of Akino's last name, then he was either directly involved in these dreams or even the one who came up with them. The young man simply continued to walk, ignoring the question, and said, "The fate can be incredibly harsh. There are countless ways to change things in this world. However, occasionally it might be better to remain ignorant than to find out too late. Do you not believe that?" "What is the intended meaning of that?" Rias demanded, but the young man continued to ignore them. With a sigh, the young man went on. The one who defines his fate is a fitting description of a Toya. His entire life, without considering his own happiness, he made the people of his kingdom happy. Thus, after his people learned of his love, the statement that it was one of the kingdom's happiest days is not hyperbole. In fact, a lot of people at the time began preparing to erect a massive statue of the woman who made their beloved king happy. Even though he spoke in a solemn tone, it was obvious that the word woman was spit out with venom. He proceeded to a sword with a golden handle and a crossguard that resembled a four-winged bat, laughing bitterly as he touched the handle. Then it took place. It was supposed to be a Toya's happiest day ever had turned into the most depressing day of his life. All of the preparations, every hope had been in vain. For the first time in his life, a woman defeated a Toya because he was powerless over his fate. If she asked, he would give the woman everything. The fact that the king who rises from the hopelessness avoided his hatred and despair was a miracle. With a snap of his finger, 5 magic circles materialized beneath Rias's and everyone else's feet. The young man's cold blue eyes gave them a chill. "A warning to all of you. The dark Kiva of Fates has come, spinning and trusting everything into his heir. The one who dares go against his heir shall wander in the depths of hell for eternity. The overwhelming rule shall be commenced. The humanity shall be protected. With the rise of the winds, a new king shall emerge." Then Rias's group disappeared. The young man sighed, looked up at the sky, and laughed. "Well, Wataru, it seems you will get a very large harem soon." Time skip. Lunch break and KUOH Academy next day. Wataru wandered aimlessly, yawning stiffly and shaking his head to waken up from his slumber. Everyone was exhausted from last night. For the first time, Soji allowed Shuchi to prepare breakfast because he was too exhausted to haul himself into the kitchen. Yukari had relocated to Wataru's room because she lacked the energy to go home, while Daiki had taken a coach in the living room because he had also been too exhausted to go to his room. The worst case had been Haruto, who was forced to skip school after completely passing out from exhaustion. Yoko, who had depleted 4 taels worth of chakra, was hardly standing at all. Nevertheless, the mission was successful. Wataru's former self had been spared only to go through the 10 years of hell. Wataru shook his head, his thoughts drifting back to the time Alaya explained the portal's operation. Review. First of all, you had already known that chakra was used to stabilize the circle, nay? After receiving a confirmation nod, Alaya continued. Now there are two reasons why I need both Daiki and Yukari in opening a portal. 1. Daiki's power while can help us travel from worlds to worlds, but his power isn't second magic since he can only come to certain alternative worlds and the place in the world he arrive is always random except he had come to that place before. 2. Yukari's power while connecting to worlds, but her power belongs to the barrier's domain, not to mention that she can only travel to worlds that have connection to her home world Gensokyo, but her power over gaps gives us what Daiki don't have. With the gap, the traveler can travel to specific places the traveler want. So in short, you used both Daiki and Yukari-chan's ability to create something similar to second magic, right? Wataru responded with a scowl. But what about Haruto's and Soji's part? Haruto's part was to create an inferior replica of fifth magic. Wataru erupted. Fifth magic? Are you kidding me? While Elia remained silent. Do you know how dangerous it is? Did you try to kill Haruto? He asked. Please calm down, Wataru-kun, I didn't try to kill Haruto. Elia replied, the time ring I lent Haruto is a mystic code I took from an alternative Haruto in another world. That ring can help him utilize an inferior version, or more like a small fragment, of fifth magic. As you know, time isn't something can be simply rewinded as one's wish. No matter how much time you rewind, the time will still be there until it is spent. If there is no other place to put the amount of time you rewinded, eventually after the rewinded time is spent, everything will still become the same during the activation. The amount of time Haruto rewind will be transferred to the ring. If you noticed, you would see that the ring's power was very dull. This was the result of two previous times the alternative Haruto used. Eventually, the ring would soon crumble to dust. And Soji? Wataru asked, taking a few deep breaths to clear his head. Soji's part was to create a time paradox with his clock-up ability. At the moment, you are spending the time in this world in the present. The time in your old world had been already spent long ago, which means the timeline in the past had settled. So in order to change it, we need a blank space in the timeline to put a change in it so the timeline can be changed. It likes an equation. One small condition is added or removed and the equation will have to be recalculated. Since clock-up's power was in fact time manipulation, it can create a time paradox if it meets some certain conditions. The time paradox is the blank space. We need that is all I can say. End of flashback. Kukukukukukukuku. A few twisted giggles interrupted Wataru's train of thought. Wataru furrowed his brow in frustration and looked in the direction of the source. Humanoid figures were hiding in the bushes close to the girls' locker room window, and Wataru recognized them right away. The first was a former jock and school sports star, whom Wataru strongly suspected of being a perverted self-proclaimed lolicon, perverted baldy, and sexual harassment paparazzi were among his well-earned nicknames. Matsuda was his more popular name. The second was a pervert who professed to be able to determine a woman's body measurements simply by looking at her perverted glasses, and 3 sizes scouter were two of his own monikers. Motohama was his name. The last one was an unproductive pervert who was notorious for his complete fixation on women's bodies, especially their breasts. Hyodo Issei was his name. The pervert trio, Wataru sighed, muttering to himself, damn it. My damn so-called toad godfather is better than these guys. They're worse than that, damn it, twice. I know that everyone is a pervert, but come on, these guys' actions aren't just perverted. Sexual harassment is what it is. Damn it, 3 times. How should we handle them now? Achoo. Gosh, it seems like some attractive women are mentioning me. Where are they all? He turned back to his peeping hole and laughed at a certain pervert with silver hair. When he turned around, he saw a large group of irate kunoichi with weapons in their hands and an aura that said only one thing. Death. Suddenly, a lot of keys slammed into his back. The jutsu. Run like a scared bitch. The pervert screamed as he searched for a way out to save his skin, but the mob of irate women had already blocked the only way out, and they began beating the living daylights out of him. The day wasn't going well for Yura Tsubasa when she and Momo arrived at the student council room this morning. Everything was in disarray, and it took almost 30 minutes to clean and reorganize everything. Things only got stranger when a big carton box and some ropes suddenly appeared in the room. When she returned during the lunch break, Yura complained to herself as she made her way to the recycle bin, but before she could discard the box, a voice caught her attention. Well, I apologize, will you discard that box? When Yura turned around, she noticed a brown-haired student with a muffler on his head, a small school bag in his left hand, and a weary smile that made her face flush. She quickly straightened up and said, yes, indeed. Oh, and you are? Oh, I apologize for my error. My name is Wataru, Class 3A, Kurnai Pendragon. Wataru, the male student, bowed. It's very nice to meet you. and Yura's eyes widened as she heard his name. Please call me Yura. My name is Yura Tsubasa, Class 2C ne Kurenai Senpai. Are you one of our school's new princes? Yura said. Please don't remind me about those things, Wataru said, shaking his head wearily and raising his hands in a surrender gesture apparently, following the arrival of his group and his accidental performance yesterday. Aoko was praised as the Bishoujo princess, and charts named Prince Charming charts were made by female students and some female teachers. Wataru shuddered at this. 1 Kurenai Pendragon Wataru, violin played, 2 Tendo Soji. 3rd, Kurenai Pendragon Wataru, normal, 4, Soma Haruto. 5 Arizato Minato 6, Hino Eiji 7 Sugami Shuchi. 8, Yuto Kiba. Anyway, Wataru said, you mentioned that you were going to discard them, correct? Can I have them, then? Well okay, I suppose however, how are you going to handle these things? As she gave him the items, Yura asked inquisitively. Well the box is big enough yes. Ropes are present here as well excellent. Thank you very much for your kindness, Yura-san, and please just call me Wataru and drop the senpai part if you like, Wataru muttered as he looked at the box. There is no issue, Wataru senpai however, senpai, you haven't responded to my query why do you require these items? Wataru dismissively waved his hand and said, well, nothing important there is just some trash I need to pack nevertheless. Once more, Yura-san, I sincerely appreciate your generosity. Wataru quickly left after making a bow and flashing his typical weary smile, which caused the brunette to flush oddly. Yura began to follow him, but before she could turn the corner, she heard something that sounded a little unsettling. Oh my, stop, please. Why did you three do this, Root? Oh, it is painful, have mercy, please. Don't the three of you respect women? Oh my, stop, please, Ark, my arms. That's not how they should bend. Yura peered over the corner and saw that Wataru was slapping his hands together while the carton box, which was now on the ground and tied with numerous ropes, was groaning. Wataru lifted the box and carried it into the gym with minimal effort. When Yura entered, she saw Wataru place the box in front of the girls' locker room, take out a paper and a pen, write something on the paper, and then slap the paper on the box. Wataru then hurriedly left the area after knocking on the door 3 times and yelling, "Special delivery." When Hanakai Momo and her classmates heard the call, they all instantly went into alert mode and hurriedly changed into their clothes. Who could blame them for being cautious when the notorious perverted trio ran around the academy snooping on the girls? Momo and her classmates opened the door violently, ready to attack with the shinai that the kendo club had left in the room, only to discover Yura standing outside reading something on a paper. Yura-san? Who placed this box here, do you know? The white-haired bishop inquired. Yura handed the paper to a fellow member and said, "It's Wataru-senpai." Curious, Momo took the paper and read aloud. They were spotted snooping around the locker room. Enjoy your beating, and please use caution going forward. You said? Wataru-senpai. Yura-san, did you mean Wataru-senpai Kurenai Pendragon? A random Momo's classmate asked. Yura nodded in agreement, then began cutting the rope and opening the box, which caused everyone's eyes to widen as they saw the perverted trio covered in bruises and tied like pigs, all the while mumbling something about nightmare, devil, demonic shinai, and so on. Momo's only reaction upon seeing the moaning perverted trio was, wow. I can now see why Wataru-senpai claimed he needed the box to pack some trash. Yura went on. Senpai did say to have a fun beating, so let's enjoy ourselves while we beat these trash. Yes. The girls let out a cry. Have mercy please. The perverted trio exclaimed, but it was completely ignored, and until the bell rang to end the lunch break, the gym was filled with agonizing cries. Time skip. Occult Research Club, KUOH Academy, after school. In the Occult Research Club room, Rias and her peers Akeno, Kaneko, and Yuto were now seated on one of the 2 long couches, while Sona and her peers occupied the other. Everyone, with the exception of Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, Sona, and Shinra, was interested in the meeting. Biting her bottom lip, Rias recalled the exchange she had with the other participants in the shared dream. Review. We all decide to keep these dreams a secret, then. It doesn't sound like you one bit, Rias, Sona said, arching her left eyebrow at the Occult Research Club president. I know, Rias said wearily, but you mentioned that it's possible that the blonde man we met in the dream was the one who made the dreams and sent them to us, and we don't have any way to verify whether or not they are real. To be honest, I hope they're mistaken. Sona went on, nodding her head. Now concerning the stray devil, which team will remove it? Yours or mine? We can talk about it later because it appears that there is still no evidence of it in the area. Let's just concentrate on this afternoon's meeting for the time being. Ended flashback. Rias was startled out of her reverie by the sound of the door opening, and she looked up to see Wataru and 5 other students of 4 males and 1 female enter the clubroom. Rias and Sona stood up from the coaches to greet the newcomers, and everyone's eyes widened when they saw a dull gray veil-like barrier appear. 3 more people, 2 males and a 9-tailed kitsune gorilla, emerged from the barrier before it vanished. Well, my group has arrived. Let's get started, Wataru said. The image of a weary and somewhat shy person had completely vanished, replaced by a serene, group demeanor. His eyes now had a piercing gaze that gave everyone the impression that he was peering into their souls. All right, welcome to Kuo Academy. I'm the president of the Occult Research Club. I am Rias Gremory, one of the 72 pillars of the underworld and the heiress of the Gremory clan. Rias introduced her peerage members, Himejima Akeno, Taju Kaneko, and Kiba Yuto, while quietly observing Wataru's reaction. The dream was still fresh in her mind, and even though she had no evidence to support its veracity, it was simply too real. In addition, she knew that although her brother always behaved like a child, he would never do anything like seduce another person's girlfriend and force her to betray her boyfriend. Would he? I'm Sona Citri, the president of the student council and heiress of the Citri clan. Thank you for visiting Kuo Academy. This is Shinra Tsubaki, my vice president. Hanakai Momo has white hair. Kusaka Raya has 2 short braids. Meguri Tomo has reddish-brown hair. Nomura Ruruko has brown hair and twin pigtails. And Yura Sababsaw has blue hair. We are all members of the student council. Wataru said bluntly. I see. I suppose it's our turn now. My name is Wataru, Class 3A Kurenai Pendragon. Wataru, it's your turn, Soji. Walking the path of heaven, the man who will rule everything, Soji said, pointing to the ceiling as he started his customary introduction. Tendo Soji, Class 3B, is who I am. The boy with the blue hair said quietly. Arizato Minato, Class 3C. Soma Haruto, Class 3C, Hino Eiji, 3F Class. I'm glad to have met you all. Sugami Shuchi, Class 3F, Kato Daiki, Treasure Hunter. Aozaki Aoko, Class 2D. Yoko the 9-tails kitsune said, Kurenai Yoko, causing everyone's eyes aside from Wataru's group to enlarge. What does Kurenai mean to you? As Akeno, Sona, Tsubaki, Yura, Momo, and surprisingly Tomo narrowed their eyes. Rias snarled menacingly and directed her malevolent gaze at the kitsune. Wataru clapped his hands to attract everyone's attention while shaking his head wearily. All right, Yoko-chan, that is sufficient now. Keep in mind 2 things before I respond to any queries from you and your group. To begin with, everything we say will remain in this room. Nobody else will be aware of this meeting. Equivalent exchange comes last. 1 question from my group is exchanged for 1 from each of you. This meeting will end when I have no more questions. No more questions. Despite Wataru's worn-out tone, his words carried a great deal of authority, giving Rias and Sona the impression that they were in front of a king and eliminating any opportunity for objections or agreements. Sona nodded. Fair enough. Wataru wasn't foolish. Easy to trust others. Yes, he blamed Eiji for that, but foolish? No, he knew too well that by offering this meeting, he had agreed to play a risky game. High-class devils like Rias and Sona were very dangerous when it came to bargaining, negotiation, and, to some extent, interrogation. By mimicking the way his 2-san used to act as a judge in the courtroom in the past, his speech now had much more weight and a way out if things went wrong. Now was the time to put what he had learned from Kirini-san and his Ka-san in interrogation, negotiation, and diplomacy. Rias complained, fine, but before he could ask any questions, Akeno appeared carrying a tray filled with teacups and other refreshments for the visitor. Wataru took a sip from his cup and exclaimed, wow, it's delicious. Akeno giggled as she held the tray to her chest, causing her breasts to swell. Fufufu, thank you very much, Wataru-kun. Do you want some more? Where is this tea made? Akeno became alert and turned to face the person who had asked the question. Era. Soji repeated, looking uninterested, where do you make this tea? Over there in the kitchen. What makes you want to know that? Are you curious about my tea's ingredients? Akeno asked, cocking her head slightly. Without saying a word, Soji rolled up his sleeves and went into the kitchen. 5 minutes later, he placed a pot of tea on the table and began pouring it. As soon as Soji began pouring the tea, a wonderful aroma filled the clubroom. Rias' mouth exploded when she took a sip of Soji's tea. The flavors weren't as strong as Akeno's tea, but they were so well balanced. Shuchi laughed heartily and remarked, wow, as expected from Soji, never feeling satisfied with the current taste and always try to make it better. Rias hesitantly began, Akeno, I hate to say it, but I like this tea better than yours. Akeno was startled, but Soji stopped her before she could say anything. Your tea is perfectly fine, Hamejima-san. Although your tea tastes great, it is also a weakness. There's a slight imbalance between the flavors in your tea, and it's just too good, which could cause taste fatigue. In actuality, my tea is identical to Hamejima-san's, but it lacks the balance created by the different amounts of ingredients. When a gray cloud appeared over her head, Akino's shoulders slumped in defeat. Inside, she was furious at the young man with the black hair who had just ruined her chance to win Wataru over. Wait, why did I want to impress Wataru-kun? Akeno thought in shock. Will you all please remember why we are present? Sona inquired. Oh right. Now, our first question, Rias said sheepishly. What are you? Wataru turned to his group and said, hey guys, what am I? Soji described him as a violin obsessor, with a dull expression. Minato remarked, a somewhat slight cynical leader. A sword maniac. Made fun of Haruto. A good guy who wants to help and save other people, was Eiji's cheerful description. A subpar cook never stops learning, Shuchi remarked with a kind grin. Daiki shrugged and said, a forgotten prodigy. A fool who consistently risks his life to save others. And that also applies to you, Eiji, complained Aoko. A trickle of blood began to drip from Yoko's nose, and she giggled perversely, my future mate. With her typical laugh, Akeno pondered, my, it seems Wataru is quite a ladies' man, foo. Well, a perspiring Wataru remarked, basically I'm all those things. While Yura and Tomo were glaring murderously at the laughing Kitsune, Rias and Sona were furious with Wataru for avoiding the true meaning of the question. Wataru sipped his tea and went on. It's my turn. Does anyone here see any indications of fallen angels? Everyone's attention was immediately drawn to Wataru's question. Angels that have fallen. Does the city have fallen angels? Within my territory? Where? How are you aware of this? Do you have any evidence? Rias exploded as her inquiries reached Wataru at breakneck speed. Whoa, 5 questions in a row. Wataru jokingly remarked, it looks like I can ask you 5 questions in my next turn, as Rias realized that her outburst had just helped Wataru win the meeting. Well, to respond to your query, Rias-san, first of all, the answer is yes. Fallen angel. I did not, however, mention that there were fallen angels here. I asked because Minato had discovered fallen angel traces close to a bridge in the city's north last night. Since the traces Minato had discovered were cold, at least almost a week before we arrived in this city, we are unsure if the fallen angels are still present or not, and here are the proofs if you're looking for them. Wataru picked up his school bag and reached inside to remove some feathers that Rias, Sona, Akeno, and the others instantly recognized as belonging to fallen angels. Aboard, Wataru said, my turn. While Sona glared at both her rival and her childhood friend, they wouldn't have been at a disadvantage if Rias hadn't lost her temper. Going forward, she would be in charge of this meeting. No, it was more like an interrogation now. First question. Are there any reincarnated devils in this room besides Sona and Rias? Sona said, all of them are reincarnated devils. Based on Wataru's previous statement, Sona deduced that Wataru was well versed in the evil pieces system. Second and third question. I assume this academy is supported by the Gremory clan. Based on what I know in Rias, is there any connection between this academy and your brother, the Crimson Satan? When Wataru mentioned the damn Gremory who had contributed to breaking his Two-San's heart, he briefly lost control of his emotions and let a tiny hint of venom laced into his voice. Fortunately, nobody noticed except Wataru's allies. Rias responded, maintaining a straight face while controlling her emotions and attempting to suppress her curiosity about how Wataru knew her brother and why he would want to know if he had ties to this academy. Yes, the administrator of the academy is my father, Lord Gremory. Regarding my brother, he belongs to this academy's directorate. Who is in that room? Rias-san. That is the fourth question. Wataru pointed to the door with numerous seals on it and said, how the hell did he know about Gasper? This Wataru is much more powerful than what I assume if he can detect Gasper's presence in the room despite so many seals applied to the room. Rias exclaimed inwardly, and Sona could only sigh. Wataru had been in complete control of the meeting since Rias's outburst, and now he only needed to direct his questions at Rias, who might know a little about negotiation but was obviously not the right person for these kinds of meetings given her inexperience. As she looked back at the waiting Wataru, she could easily see a composed, intelligent, and confident young man whose aura and posture created an air of confidence around him. In addition, she thought he looked pretty handsome. Sona blushed as she tried to ignore her thoughts, saying, wait, what? No, bad Sona. Now you must focus, not eye-humping him. Still, he looked like an ideal husband. Focus, Sona. Sona was abruptly brought back to the meeting by Rias's response. There's another member of my peerage in that room. He had some problems managing his authority, so we choose to temporarily confine him. Wataru scowled and responded bluntly, I see now for my fifth query. As Wataru's brown eyes turned crimson, the room's temperature abruptly dropped a few degrees. Wataru spoke in a demonic voice full of malice. Tell me the truth. Have you hurt any defenseless people? For a split second, Wataru's aura changed from serene to demonic as the air seemed to have thinned, making it difficult to breathe. Gravity appeared to have tripled, and a massive killing intent flooded the room. Rias, Sona, and everyone else swore they had seen the silhouette of a demon in golden armor with a red bat wings-like face behind Wataru, but it was only a blink of an eye. He exuded an aura that shouted, Ultimate Ruler. Sona forced the words out of her dry throat while fighting to regain her breath and posture. No, we haven't. At least on purpose. New regulations that prohibit devils from inflating the cost of the request were put in place following the Underworld Civil War, as well as killing and assaulting people without cause. Wataru's lips curled into a barely perceptible smirk. The pressure and ki gradually subsided as the air and temperature returned to normal after a silent minute that seemed to last forever to Rias's and Sona's group. This caused everyone to exhale a long sigh they were unaware they had been holding. All right, we've concluded our meeting. We're going to leave now. Everyone, aside from Wataru's group, including Sona, who had anticipated this, was taken aback by Wataru's statement. When Wataru's group stood up, the dull gray veil-like barrier materialized. Whoa, why? Rias stammered. I had previously stated that the meeting would end when I had nothing more to ask. No more questions. I have addressed your inquiries, just as you have addressed mine. Wataru uttered in a monotone. We don't need to prolong this meeting because we already have the information we require. I'll see you tomorrow. Following that, Wataru's group began to move to break through the barrier, but Yura, Momo, and Tomo called out before Wataru could do so. Wataru-senpai, please wait. Wataru turned back to face the three she-devils and arched an eyebrow, saying, yes? I want to express my gratitude. Tomo blushed and said, for helping me organize paperwork after I messed them up. Despite your claim that you didn't require gratitude, however, I still want to express my gratitude. If it weren't for your assistance, I would have arrived late for class. We want to thank you for taking care of the perverted trio for us, Yura and Momo said, if it hadn't been for you. Wataru's face softened as he raised his right hand to stop Yura and Momo. A rare, genuine smile spread across his face, causing all the women in the clubroom to blush deeply. I said there was no issue, didn't I, Tomo-chan? Always help people in need if you can, is one of the lessons my two-san taught me, and I make it a personal rule to assist others whenever I can. If I don't extend my hand when I can and there is a hand reaching for help, the regret will make me wish I were dead, Eiji once said to me. I don't want that, so I extend my hand. Wataru looked at his kohai and said, like Eiji, that was part of the reason I helped people. Yura and Momo, I don't need any kind of thanks for my help in preventing those trash from violating your privacy, he said. With a few exceptions, women are like flowers and priceless jewels to me. If you take good care of them, they will blossom and bring beauty to the world. Before the females' blushes from seeing Wataru's genuine smile could go away, they multiplied tenfold after Wataru's speech was heard by everyone in the clubroom. Kaneko even got a big tink of pink on her cheeks, and Rhea literally started to shoot steam out of her ears. Wataru remarked, well, then, it's time I go home now. Oh, and by the way, you should check the southern part of this city if you want to find a stray devil named Razkasa. And please let me know if you would like to have a free dinner at my house tomorrow. Is that an invitation, Era? You're very brave, Wataru-kun, Akeno chuckled. Well, that's how you could see it. Wataru shrugged and stepped through the barrier before it vanished. Anyway, Yane. The silence was broken after a few minutes by a blushing Sona, who said, so shall we come? You don't matter to me. However, one thing is certain. Our club will go. Wataru-kun is such an interesting individual. Fufufu, a blushing Rias said, laughing as a single idea began to take shape in her head. Kurenai Pendragon. Wataru, you're undoubtedly such an intriguing person and an intriguing mystery. I can't wait to have you as a part of my peerage. Fufufu. In her eyes, Rias couldn't believe it. She opened her eyes to find herself standing in a location she was all too familiar with, alongside Akeno, Kaneko, Sona, and Tsubaki. Gramarye Castle's Grand Hall. The Grand Hall was now a flurry of activity, with lords and ladies of 34 remaining pillars that Rias recognized, including her parents, Lord and Lady Gramarye, as well as members of their families and their peerage, seated at numerous tables in front of a stage. Then Rias noticed something else. Who are they, Sona? I haven't met enough people. Sona was only able to shake her head when Rias pointed to numerous individuals she didn't recognize and said, and based on the number of tables, there are much more than 34 pillars are presenting here. I'm not sure. Rias, is that Beelzebub-sama? I wonder? Sona gestured to the blue Satan, who was now seated at a table close to the stage with a sluggish-looking Falbium Asmodeus, a contemplative underworld Civil War commander Roygun Belphegor, and a silent Seraphal Leviathan? The strange thing was that, while everyone else was having a great time at the banquet, the Satan's table was extremely quiet, to be exact, too quiet. With hesitation, Tsubaki said, Kaichu, is Leviathan-sama actually there? Why doesn't she say anything? Normally, she would be more vivacious. The president of the student council said drearily, shaking her head. I'm not sure. Tsubaki, however, I feel uneasy about this for some reason. How awful. Rias tilted her head and asked, I'm not sure, said Sona, but it feels like we're going to see something we shouldn't see or know. Before Rias could speak, Lord Gremory's voice echoed throughout the grand hall, drawing the attention of all the devils and causing them to turn to face the stage where he and Lady Gremory were standing. Every devil I know, could I please have your attention? Lord Gremory went on. Today I am very pleased and graceful that all of you can make it to our banquet. After noticing that everyone's focus had shifted to the stage, one think the banquet is going well for everyone, don't you think? Following a round of course, Gremory Dono, and numerous nods of approval, Lord Gremory proceeded. Part of the reason I'm hosting this lavish feast today is to commemorate our faction's triumph over the old faction. A year ago we won the war against the old faction despite suffering many losses following the Great War with Heaven. More importantly, the 72 pillars are still in place, and a new era has begun in the underworld. For the new underworld, have a drink. For the underworld's redesign. While the devils in the grand hall raised their glasses in the air and roared, Rias, Akano, Kaneko, Sona, and Tsubaki were struggling to believe what they had just heard. Bushu, what does this mean? Why did Lord Gremory-sama state that there were still 72 pillars in place? Did the Great War between Heaven and the underworld cause the extinction of the 38 pillars? Upon hearing what Lord Gremory had to say, Akano was taken aback. If what she had just heard was accurate, then why was the history she had read so dissimilar from what she had just heard? Lord Gremory went on before Rias could regain consciousness following her father's words. However, the other and most significant reason is to commemorate the union of our son, the Crimson Satan Seers X Lucifer, the hero of the Underworld Civil War, and his beautiful queen, the Queen of Annihilation, Graphia Lucifuge, one of the new Satans. Following Lord Gremory's conclusion, the grand hall fell silent as Seers X Lucifer, dressed in his typical Satan attire that Rias had witnessed countless times, approached the stage grinning broadly alongside Graphia, who was wearing a sophisticated black satin wedding gown and had a strained smile on her face. Then it dawned on her. Give it a moment, Rias. Your brother isn't married to Graphia-san, is she? So why does this occur? Sona, who was taken aback by how things had turned out, said aloud what Rias had been thinking. I don't know, Rias uttered, too stunned to speak, but then she recalled. No, wait, according to my Nisama, she was on the verge of becoming his wife. Thus, if what we've observed is accurate, then... Boom. A thunderous explosion completely destroyed the grand hall's doors, hiding its entrance behind a thick layer of smoke and a small fire. A few seconds later, the grand hall began to resound with the sound of a familiar voice. There is only joy, not hate, because the goddess adores you. Healer of worlds and hero of the dawn, the broken soul has dreams of the future. Pride has vanished, the end is near, wings stripped away. Two very familiar men appeared out of the smokescreen at that precise moment. One was a young man with auburn hair who was reading a book, and the other was a man with messy black hair who was carrying a rocket launcher on his shoulder. The devils let out a lot of cries when the two men were fully visible, and judging by the way they instantly became on guard, these two were the kind of people you didn't want to mess with. Rhapsodos Genesis. The army of the Saido, Ea, which means salvation or redemption, kingdom's supreme commander. The fallen angel with one wing. Kuritsugu Emiya. Dark Kiva's right hand, the devil killer. With a humorous yet haughty tone, Genesis chuckled as he observed how the devils in the grand hall responded to him and Kuritsugu. My, oh my, you don't have to treat us that way, man, we really do have some reputation, don't we, Kuritsugu? Genesis remarked as he snapped the book shut. As he tossed the pointless rocket launcher to the ground, Kuritsugu said indifferently, it seems so, the only thing amused me is that now I am called, Devil Killer, not, Magus Killer, anymore. Genesis shrugged and said, well, things change as time flies by after all, Lord Gremory left the stage and approached the two in a cordial manner before Genesis and Kuritsugu could continue their conversation. Are you coming here on Otoya-kun's behalf, Genesis, Kuritsugu? If you do, there's no need to demolish the gate. Lord Gremory was about to finish when Genesis's cyan blue eyes turned crimson as he glared at Rias's father, releasing a great deal of killing intent. This caused everyone to unconsciously take a step back, and Lord Gremory recoiled. To you, old fart, it's Rhapsodos and Emiya, and don't you dare to call our king, Otoya-kun, growled Genesis angrily. You no longer have the right to address him by name, so it's Dark Kiva, or Kurenai-sama. To you? No. In response to your inquiry, Kurenai-sama has nothing to do with this. We came here voluntarily. As he lit a cigarette with a silver lighter that Otoya had given him years ago, Kuritsugu complained, only you, Genesis. The reason I came here mostly to make sure that you will come back in one piece. Genesis said in a dull voice, yeah, whatever, anyway. As the young man drew his long red sword around his waist, the ki emanating from Genesis suddenly multiplied tenfold. Rias's group was unable to stop what was happening in front of them, but they could sense the pressure and the dread aura coming from both the sword and Genesis. The rationale behind my visit today, let's just say that my rapier is interested in tasting the blood of a particular harlot with silver hair. However, I am certain that the flavor will be far from tolerable. Red energy began to cover the Crimson Satan's body at that very moment, and another wave of ki from an angry Seersex flooded the Grand Hall. You haughty idiot, don't you dare disparage my queen. Graphia-chan has her own emotions and decisions, and she made a decision. And my king was cheated on by that harlot. Even Rias's group was now struggling to breathe due to the pressure from the man in red coat, and Kaneko was trembling like a leaf as she hid behind Akeno. Nevertheless, the cheating part didn't escape Rias's or anyone else's ears. Genesis roared in his own demonic voice as one again. The ki emitting from Genesis flared up tenfold if any lesser devils hadn't fainted from seeing Seerzex's power display. As a flame began to flicker in his left hand, Genesis growled, and you, Seerzex Gremory, the so-called best friend of my king, you jumped in and had an affair with that damn harlot even though you knew she was seeing my king. The Memory Clan is renowned for having a strong bond with their servants. What a pitiful excuse to have an affair with the girlfriend of your supposed best friend. Lady Venelana Gremory, Rias's mother, decided to intervene at that point in an effort to defuse the tense situation and stop a fight from starting. Seerzex may be a super devil, but with the supreme commander of the Saido Kingdom as his opponent, not to mention the devil killer who was smoking in ignorance, she knew that Kuritsugu was still keeping an eye on everything around him, so the fight would be disastrous and there was no guarantee that her son would win. No, calm down, Rhapsodos Dono, we can definitely figure it out. But before Lady Gremory could finish, another massive wave of ki struck her and Lord Gremory, causing them to back away in fear. This time, the ki came from Kuritsugu, who simply threw the cancer stick's remnants to the ground and extinguished them with his shoe. Calm down. Solve. You said, calm down, Anzal, Kuritsugu said in a scathing but emotionless voice. As you solved, with Kurenai-sama, for example? Whoa, what are they? Utah discussing Kino, Emiya Dono. Lord Gremory stumbled and fidgeted under Kuritsugu's intense stare. Old fart, you are far too aware of what Kuritsugu is discussing. Don't you remember? Roared Genesis, his voice barely able to control his rage. Kurenai-sama came here, in this damn Grand Hall, 2 months ago when that son of a bitch decided to have this damn marriage party. Kurenai-sama, a king no less, kneeled down on his knees in front of you two, pleading with you both to put this marriage on hold so the damn harlot would have more time to choose her partner. However, then Kuritsugu, what did they say at the time? There is no need for that, we bless them and approve of the marriage. With a piercing gaze, Kuritsugu said, stop overreacting and grow up, Otoya. What a convenient way to solve a nuisance. No. Yes, hold on, no, I mean, wriggled Lord Gremory, but Genesis interrupted him. Genesis pointed his rapier at a pale Graphia and sneered, save your breath, old fart, return to the reason I came here now, here, right now. You, Graphia, the harlot who started all of this, will pay for your actions. The idea that Kido Shinji, Kenzaki Kazuma, Kuritsugu's lieutenant, and I gave up our lives to save a harlot like you, talking about pointless deaths, damn it. Hold on, Genesis. Calm down. That kind of hostility is unnecessary, interjected Asmodeus Falbium. G-Tan, please stop. Do something, Kiri-Tan. If a fight broke out here, many devils would be caught in the crossfire, and with all the remnants of many pillars in the Grand Hall, if Genesis and Kuritsugu went all out, she wouldn't be sure if 72 pillars would be the same or not, pleaded Seraphal, despite her intense hatred of the silver-haired bitch standing on stage and her desire for nothing more than her death for what that harlot had done to her. Oni-Tan. You lazy ass of Satan, Shut up, Genesis snarled. Even though you were aware of this harlot's affair from the start, you chose to keep it a secret and didn't speak to Kurenai-sama at all, using the most pathetic justification I've ever heard. I was too lazy to tell, son of the bitch, don't you dare tell me to calm down. Without showing emotion, Kuritsugu pulled out his 2 Calico M950 submarine guns and said, since Kurenai-sama perceives you as a younger sitter, I advise you to move aside. Sitri-sama, my goal is to ensure that Genesis returns unscathed. I don't care what he does. At that moment, a large number of high-class devils appeared to overcome their fear and surrounded Kuritsugu and Genesis, pointing all of their weapons at them in preparation for battle. Neither of you will take action, one of the devils spoke. Another devil brandishing a halberd made the threat, drop your weapons or you will die. Kuritsugu raised an eyebrow in response, but, hey ha ha ha, 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 ha. Genesis responded with a demonic, hollow laugh. This is my only caution. I'm going all out today, so if you value your life, get out now. Otherwise you won't be able to see tomorrow if you stand in my way. The majority of the devils surrounding the two were members of peerages, so their duty was to protect their king. However, the pride of the high-class devils prevented them from backing off, especially when Kuritsugu and Genesis were outnumbered with the odds 2 against hundreds. Despite the fact that Genesis' threat was effective, based on the tense reaction of many devils, none of them backed off or retreated, which was understandable to Rias's group. Genesis said menacingly, so you have made your choice, well then. The devils and Rias's group both gasped when Genesis swiftly moved his left arm and unfurled a large black birdwing from his left shoulder. The incredulous that the alias, one-winged fallen angel, was actually true, Akeno muttered, a fallen angel's wing. As he prepared his weapons, an uninterested Kuritsugu remarked, don't take them lightly, Genesis, and spare anyone can be spared. The initial section noted the second section. Genesis smirked and aimed his rapier at the devils in front of him, saying, no promise. And right now let's start this damn party. Wataru saw what he had been all too familiar with for 5 years as soon as he opened his eyes. A never-ending field of grass illuminated by the setting sun, with numerous swords buried like grave markers. His inner world, his mindscape, the field of swords. He had the real things at his fingertips because of a certain Kaki Goldie sensei, but he still preferred to use the tracing version, even though they weren't as powerful as the real ones. Every sword and weapon he had ever seen and owned was documented and kept here. When Wataru first came here at the age of 4, it had just been a big, filthy sewer with a big cage with some work. The sewer had been transformed into a grass field with a blooming sakura tree, and now his weapons had taken the place of the sakura tree. Things change as time flies by, he thought, laughing inwardly. The gift of the goddess is infinite in mystery. In this way, we pursue it and carry it to the heavens. Ripples appear on the surface of the water. The restless soul knows no rest. And a particular obnoxious blonde Wataru calmly walked to the source of the voice and saw the same young man who had appeared in Rias's group's dream, reading the same book that Genie-san had always carried with him while lounging on a sofa. Wataru said in a dull voice, Loveless, Act 1. The blonde man grinned wryly, snapped the book shut, and got up from the couch as it crumbled into thin air. You still recall, huh? Naruto, the blonde said menacingly. How am I not aware that it was? Wataru grinned and tapped his temple with his forefinger, saying, Fishcake, you've beaten into my head. You sword maniac. How many times did I tell you to stop calling me Fishcake? I am Sukouru. A cubed a 1/4 a, meaning storm or squall, not Fishcake, Sukouru growled. The person who just called me by my name said, No, our old name, Wataru thought. There's no reason not to call you Fishcake if you can't call me by my new name. Additionally, you will insult yourself if you insult me too much. After all, you and I are two sides of the same coin that was formerly known as Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, or, to put it another way, thou art I and I am you. Sukouru shuddered and put his book away, saying, Okay, I know, and stop using old English like Ka-san. Every time I heard that it still gives me a creep. Wow, my inner self doesn't like hearing old English. That's really a surprise, Wataru remarked, laughing mockingly. Joke aside, that is, you pulled me in here. But why? I'll take a break if you want to gripe about me not pressing Rias and Sona for more details. Oh my god, call that Gramarye by her given name? Sukouru sneered. I thought you detested the Gramarye? Yes, but only who had a hand in breaking our two-san's heart, said Wataru, the son of the bitch Sirzex, the strongest queen, harlot Graphia, the so-called honorable lord, and lady, Gramarye. The Sukouru interrupted, Don't forget about the lazy ass of Satan Falbium Asmodeus. If I ever meet him, I will let him have a taste of a num. Okay. Stop rambling and tell me why you pulled me into the mindscape. Wataru snorted. I doubt you would just pull me in here just to hear you rambling. Sukouru said, laughing heartily as a deranged grin spread across his face. Yes, that's why I brought you in here. All right, Naruto, let's dance. Clank. With a sudden burst of speed, Sukouru ran toward Wataru with Erendite in his hands. He swung the sword downward, but Wataru's Galadine intercepted it, forcing Wataru to jump back to avoid it. Sukouru continued to press the attack without giving Wataru a chance to recover or counterattack, and it appeared that Wataru was struggling to hold his ground when he suddenly threw a dagger at his left armpit. As he deflected the projectile, he strengthened his arm muscles and knocked Sukouru back with the flat side of Galadine instantly. Wataru's mind was filled with images of numerous weapons. Continue on. As Wataru dismissed Galadine, a red spear, known as the Soaring Spear that strikes with death, and the Cursed Spear of the great Irish hero Ka Chilane, slowly materialized in his right hand. Wataru, arching his back, pumped as much prana as he could into the spear, and threw the red spear toward Sukouru with all his might. As Sukouru raised his left palm, Wataru backed away from Sukouru by 100 meters, crouching on all fours, and accelerating through an approach run by racing forward before he took to the skies. Guy Bolg, Hey, Ayaz, in their eyes, Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, Sona, and Tsubaki were in disbelief. The wedding party in the Gremory Castle's Grand Hall had been transformed into a bloodbath right in front of their eyes. No. A massacre. No. A slaughter. No. A bloodshed. No. None of those words could adequately describe what they witnessed. There were hundreds of devils' corpses scattered throughout the Grand Hall, and the floor was covered in blood. Many devils were slowly dying on the floor, along with what appeared to be the hands, arms, legs, bodies, and heads of numerous dead devils. The sight was so sad that Rias was unable to speak because they had all perished before they could escape her throat. Sona, Rias, and everyone else knew what killing meant. In fact, both Sona and Rias had killed a good number of devils, but they were all stray devils, and killing them was a mercy to both humans and themselves. However, the manner in which they were killed was too cruel. Rias questioned whether even the most insane exorcist could be so cruel. Only a few devils, all of whom are women and small children, were spared, and the devil killer, Emiya Kuritsugu, spared over half of them. This massacre was orchestrated by Genesis Rhapsodos, the one-winged fallen angel, and Emiya Kuritsugu, the devil killer. Two people against hundreds of devils, and now Rias and everyone else could understand why they were so feared by the devils. They swung through devils after devils and struck with precision. Each striker always aimed for the kill or completely incapacitated the target with very fatal blows, making the target die a slow and painful death. Not to mention that their fighting styles were perfectly in sync. Kuritsugu's incredible reflexes, cold and ruthless yet unpredictable fighting style, and Genesis's superior yet elegant swordsmanship were all in sync with each other. It couldn't be called perfect because both Kuritsugu and Genesis had minor injuries, but they completely dominated the battle, not to mention that they were singing why they were cutting down devils like trash, as if this massacre was nothing but child play to them. Thus, we are once more losing ourselves in excitement. Koshite Bakura Mata Hashide Iru. Tokyo, Osaka Kan Mo Sutobeshite, or, we don't care about the distance between Tokyo and Osaka. Beowulf, Surtur II, the ultimate rook, and Okita Soji, the strongest knight of the underworld, were all panting heavily and had numerous serious injuries on their bodies, as evidenced by the dark red color of their clothing, while Genesis appeared to be far from exhausted with only a few minor cuts here and there. Oh, hurry up! Get up! As the strongest knight, the ultimate rook, and one of the strongest pawns, are these the only things you three are capable of? Said Genesis after he had sung his part of the song he was singing with Kuritsugu. Pathetic. Beowulf roared in rage and ran toward Genesis. Beowulf was well known for his dislike of enemies who didn't take him seriously, and the idea of his enemy not taking him seriously infuriated the hero's descendant. He would make this haughty one-winged fallen angel regret not taking him seriously. Spurts of blood spurted out of Beowulf's chest as he fell to his knees before he could process what had happened. Genesis easily knocked Beowulf unconscious with a roundhouse kick while Beowulf's blood dripped from his rapier. Pathetic, sneered Genesis, and you too, get up, I'm at the end of my patience. Okita and Surtur stood up shakily and charged at the smirking Genesis with a quick motion of his left hand on the flat side of his rapier. He channeled his magic into it, giving it a red aura and causing runic symbols to appear along its length with a crazed smile on his face. Genesis crouched on his legs and ran toward the charging opponents. Koko ya Miranai Kashiki wo Miset yo, show me a landscape that is hidden from my view. Anyo hai no yu na kire na shashin. A lovely picture like the one from that day. As Rias's former caretaker lay in a pool of his own blood, Kuritsugu's amazing rolls, flips, and jumps allowed him to weave through waves and waves of flame, ice, whirlwinds, lightning, and various forms of magic attack from McGregor Mathers, the strongest and most injured bishop, who was doing his best to heal a bloody Enku. If it weren't for Enku's chest rising, Rias would have screamed, believing he had been dead. Bang! Its bullet pierced McGregor's barrier and struck his right chest, causing him to scream in agony. If the bishop's instinct hadn't been correct, the bullet would have struck his heart. Kuritsugu's Thompson contender opened fire. McGregor coughed up blood and attempted to get to his feet, but Kuritsugu used his submachine gun, the Calico M950, to fire a magazine of silver bullets at his legs, causing him to fall to the ground. Kuritsugu then removed 2 silver crosses, impaled them at the bishop's hands, and left him immobile. Kimi wa koibito itsu? Which past life did you love me in? Soda furo mo deshu no en. Our sleeves rubbing against one another must have been the result of an old bond. While in midair, Genesis twisted his body at an unbelievable angle, avoiding Surtur's flame punch as he slammed his left elbow into the rook's gut, knocking the wind out of him. Okita attempted to thrust his katana forward to impale Genesis, but he quickly regretted his choice when, using the ultimate rook as a meat shield, he grabbed Surtur's left arm and pushed him toward Okita, causing the katana to sink into the rook's stomach, much to Okita's horror. Before he could recover, Genesis swung his rapier downward, breaking Okita's katana and causing a deep, large gash on his chest. Using magic to reinforce his legs, Genesis kicked both the knight and the rook to the ground with a heel drop kick, sending feathers flying from his wing as both Searsex's servants to the ground, impaling both Okita and Surtur to the ground, landing next to an uninterested Kuritsugu. All right, after our wedding crash, how many clans will be eliminated? Well, if I'm not mistaken, I'd say roughly of the 72 pillars, half perhaps more, Kuritsugu uttered in a chilly voice that made Rias shudder. As he barely avoided the dark red energy ball that came from a furious Searsex, Genesis abruptly cocked his head to the right. You came here first. You also ruined my wedding celebration, and you severely wounded my servants and members of my peerage. In addition to killing a great number of devils, I will hold you accountable for your actions on the name of Sir Zesh's grave. The already heavy air became even heavier as Searsex's energy literally began to cover his entire body. He roared. Said the one who watched the fight instead of helping for the last 5 minutes, Genesis scoffed. Searsex. Stop, please, avoid using it, Graphia begged, but it was too late. Aura of destruction in the shape of a human. The castle began to tremble violently due to the tremendous power, and Searsex's body began to transform into the energy of power of destruction. A crimson humanoid figure of the power of destruction now stood in Searsex's place with a monstrous roar. Searsex charged at Genesis and Kuritsugu, but before he could get there, something happened. Play music. Tetrafang's Roots of the King. A humanoid figure appeared on the ground in front of Genesis and Kuritsugu, surrounded by a dark red magic circle with a bat-like symbol in the center. The figure was wearing a bodysuit armor with a black chestplate, dark crimson shoulder guards and gauntlets, and crimson iron boots with silver outline on them. The figure's helmet had a blue bat-like visor with a small bat wing on each side, a bat head on the forehead, and, lastly, a silver mouthguard with 4 silver fangs. He was holding a sword with a 4-winged bat-like crossguard in his right hand. The sword in the newcomer's hand swung horizontally, knocking Searsex aside and slamming him through the wall of the Grand Hall. At that moment, Kuritsugu and Genesis both dropped to their right knees, their right fist placed on their hearts. They all said, Kurenai-sama, at the same time that the other devils were trembling like leaves due to the newcomer's presence. Rias, Akeno, Kaneko, Sona, and Tsubaki's eyes widened as Graphia began to cry. Kurenai Atoya, Kiva Dark, Saga's heir. The Saido Kingdom's king, Otodia-kun. Ignoring everything around him, Atoya turned to face Kuritsugu and Genesis and spoke in a tone that was cold and emotionless, sending shivers down everyone's spine. What did I say about not getting involved with anything that had to do with them? She had already decided what she wanted to do. Kurenai-sama, it's all my fault. Genesis bowed his head, saying, Kuritsugu has no responsibility in this. I took this action in order to exact revenge on the I referred to Graphia. I'll accept any penalty for my actions. There was a brief pause before Atoya uttered, Excellently, we'll discuss this later. However, right now. Roar. With a growl, Searsex's aura began to spread and destroy everything in its path as he dashed through the hole he had previously made in the wall, only to be brutally knocked aside once more by Atoya's sword. Searsex, you still don't know the difference between power and strength, do you? It seems I have to end this quick, Otoya said, dropping his sword and raising his left hand. Chrysogrim, come on. With a burst of black flame, a beautiful black-handled sword with a black scabbard appeared on Otoya's left hand. Otoya quickly drew the sword from its scabbard, ducked under the blast Sirzex threw at him, and thrust the sword's point into Sirzex's stomach. Sirzex! Onisama! Lord and Lady Gremory and Rias both exclaimed. Oh no! For the first time in Rias's life and the lives of the other members of her group, they witnessed the most unbelievable sight, to the extent that it would be more difficult to imagine than to live in harmony with fallen angel and angel. Howled Sirzex in agony as his body twitched violently while the aura began to subdue, and Sirzex eventually changed, and when it was back to normal, Sirzex stopped twitching and fell to the ground. Fear and terror were the only things in Sirzex's eyes as Lucifer, the Crimson Satan, one of the super devils of the underworld and one of the top 10 strongest beings in the world, scrambled out of an unreadable Otoya's attack range. How does it feel to be helpless? What can you do now to make you pay, since your power of destruction has been sealed away for a while? Otoya said icily as he dismissed Chrysogrim. Otoya abruptly appeared in front of Sirzex as he was shakily getting to his feet. He punched Sirzex hard in the chest and slammed him against a wall, leaving a bat-like insignia on the wall. Nothing, said Otoya icily, because you don't have the strength to do it now. How can you do it? End music. Before Rias's parents could help Sirzex, a sphere of light appeared in the center of the grand hall, and from it a very beautiful woman who could easily surpass the beauty of the Archangel Gabriel emerged. She was tall, about an inch or two taller than Otoya, and had a face that was impossible to be feminine. With golden blonde hair and light cyan green eyes, she was wearing a dress made of golden and white armor, and she had 2 golden circulars on her shoulders, each with a large white veil. She was holding a beautiful silver scepter in her right hand, and a large white shield in her left hand. Minerva-sama, was uttered simultaneously by Kiritsugu and Genesis. Long time no see, Genesis, Kiritsugu, Minerva said simply as Otoya's armor broke and turned into quicksilver, revealing a stoic Otoya wearing his typical suit save for a blue striped shirt and a gray vest. What honor do I have to be in the goddess of the livestream's presence? A stoic Otoya laughed dryly and without humor. In a lovely but somber voice, Minerva said, I come here to tell you that the preparation is complete. Still, the amount of power and strength you offered me, 99%, is not enough. Then, Minerva-sama, please take ours. Genesis and Kiritsugu spoke simultaneously. Otoya was about to object when Genesis got up and faced his king. 100 years ago, Kurenai-sama, I vowed to accompany you on the journey through to the end, and I have no plans to abandon it since I don't know what your gift of the goddess is. How can I possibly leave you? Kiritsugu went solemnly on, Kurenai-sama, you're the first person to whom I have pledged my loyalty. You gave me a chance to fight again, to save people again. You gave me more than I could ever repay, even though you were unable to give me the opportunity to become an ally of justice since the beginning. You have carried a lot of burdens. At least let us share in your burdens. Minerva nodded in agreement. All right, I'll take 99% of your strength and power. Now the only things that need to be done are a formal announcement and the price for my help. Minerva stated. That should be enough to ensure that the bounded field will never be broken down by any kind of force or even by the true magics. Otoya spoke in a loud, demonic voice that reverberated throughout the underworld as the sword with 4 wings, the most popular crossguard one. Once Morea appeared in his right hand, he slammed the sword's tip into the ground, causing the castle to tremble violently. In the presence of Morena, the goddess of Lifestream, and Zanva, the demon imperial sword, I, Kurenai Otoya, the Dark Kiva, humbly declare that the kingdom's entrance will be sealed off going forward because it will no longer have any ties to either heaven or the underworld. As a result, anyone wishing to leave my kingdom will have 2 days to do so. Additionally, I, Kurenai Otoya, will no longer be the king of the Saido kingdom, and its destiny will be determined by its own citizens. Mote it be. Anyone who dares go against its people will wander in hell for everything. Ignoring the astonishment of the nearby devil, Otoya turned to Minerva, who had just opened a portal shortly after he concluded his announcement, as a massive wave of raw power shook the underworld to its foundation with another slam with the tip of Zanvat. It's finished, Otoya said gravely. I hope the kingdom will be protected from any threats as you said. I can guarantee that, so no worry, Otoya, replied Minerva. Before you, Genesis and Kiritsugu, begin your new journey, it's time for the price for my help. Name it. Otoya snapped. Otoya, Genesis, and Kiritsugu found it extremely difficult to believe what they were witnessing when Minerva took a deep breath and her serious tone was replaced by a faint hint of shyness as the goddess blushed. I'd like to marry your heir, Achu. Simultaneously sneezed a battered Sukouru and a battered Wataru. Sukouru retreated from his adversary and taunted him as a big rock-carved axe sword materialized in his left hand. Whoa, what the fuck, ma issue Naruto? Katsi, do you have a cold? As I fishcake, if, said Wataru. Manahoshi Zao appeared in his hands as he shuddered. Just an emotion, something like that in the past. R2-san had done nay would cause some tro problems for us anyhow. Let's fin complete this. Wit with delight. Wataru and Sukouru hurried to each other as Sukouru said. Heiken. Gashi Sabama. The 9 lives blade is effective. The, well, return? I believe I misheard you, was the smartest response Atoya could think of. The one who had given them the gift of goddess and a second chance wanted to have their king's heir's hand in marriage before his king could even find a wife, which Genesis and Kuritsugu doubted would be possible after what that Hargraphia had done to their king. I said I wanted your heir's hand in marriage, repeated Minerva as she continued to blush lightly, while Genesis and Kuritsugu couldn't believe in their eyes and ears. Atoya's nod of, I accept, took Genesis and Kuritsugu by surprise, causing their jaws to fall to the floor. However, only if I have a successor, and if my successor is a woman, well, bad luck. Minerva said in her customary lovely yet solemn tone, grinning as she moved away from the portal. Atoya, you don't need to be concerned about those things. Furthermore, I have no doubt that your heir will surpass both you and Saga, and I'll let you know what your people decided. They are not my people, not anymore. Atoya sadly uttered. Ignore it. Are you certain you want to accompany me, Genesis, Kuritsugu? Before they entered the portal together, Kuritsugu gave Atoya a slight no, and Genesis, grinning smugly, saluted him with his right middle finger and forefinger. Kurenai-sama, see you on the other side, Genesis shouted. With a dry laugh, Atoya called forth Chrysogrim and presented Zanvat and Chrysogrim to the goddess of the lifestream. Please give these swords to the kingdom's people, Minerva, said Atoya with sorrow. I no longer have the right to use them now, not to mention I no longer have the strength to wield these powers now. Minerva returned the Zanvat to Atoya and took the Chrysogrim, shaking her head. You will keep Zanvat and Atoya, and I will keep Chrysogrim. The goddess indicated the portal and said, the portal will be closed soon. Atoya, your heir will need it, even though you may not have the strength to wield it. I advise you to leave right away. Atoya stood in front of the portal, sighing and grinning pitifully at Minerva. Minerva, I appreciate everything you did for me, and, please, if you come across Saga-sama in the livestream, please accept my apology to his people for being such a pitiful monarch. Atoya, you are not weak, but I will grant your request for an apology. Kurenai Atoya the Dark Kiva. May your journey lead you to salvation. You have my blessing, Minerva said, gently placing the tip of her scepter on Atoya's forehead before pulling it away and vanishing in a flash of light. Hold on. Don't go, Atoya-kun, please. When Graphia finally snapped out of her shock, she ran toward Atoya, pleading, but to her horror, an invisible barrier prevented her from getting close to her. Atoya with his back to her, Atoya said in a voice devoid of emotion. Graphia, I don't hold you responsible for your actions. I hope your decision will satisfy you. After Atoya entered the portal, it instantly closed, leaving Graphia in tears as she collapsed to her knees and sobbed in her hands. Then everything turned black around Rias's group. Tears were streaming from Graphia Lucifuge's eyes as she awoke from her dream in a tiny chamber of Gremory Castle. Another 200 years she had been plagued by the memory of that day every single night for 200 years. She appeared to be composed, unified, cold, and resolute, but when she returned to her room and used numerous private spells and silence charms, her mask fell off, and the normally composed Graphia was replaced by a vulnerable woman with silver hair who was about to cry when the memory returned. She was unable to forgive herself for her actions, even after he had stated that he had not placed the blame on her. From the start, it had all been her fault. Everything would have been different if she hadn't been afraid to stop Searsex at that intensely passionate moment. Everything would have been different if she hadn't been reluctant to tell Atoya the truth. Everything would have been different if she hadn't been hesitant to attend Atoya's meeting rather than dining with Searsex and his family. Everything would have been different if she hadn't been hesitant to choose her partner. Everything would have been different if she hadn't been hesitant to accept Atoya's pleas to delay the wedding. She had no idea why she had felt so hollow and empty on that fateful day, which was meant to be her happiest day. Even she could see that the smile she had put on her face that day was obviously strained and empty in the eyes of other devils. One simple fact could never be changed by Searsex's attempts to hide her fault by altering history to show that the great war between heaven and the underworld was the primary cause of the 38 Pillars' extinction, even though she suspected that the remaining pillars agreed to do so primarily to keep the younger generations from learning about what could be considered the most humiliating defeat and because some of them wanted her to be free of her guilt feelings. 38 of the 72 pillars were eliminated as a result of her hesitation. And by the time she got over her reluctance, it was too late. The adage, "People realize how precious their things are only when they lose them," seemed to apply to devils, specifically Graphia. Graphia didn't realize who she wanted to be with until Atoya appeared in front of the portal. It was Atoya, not Searsex. However, it was already too late and now all that was left was a heart that was vulnerable but cold. She couldn't handle the numerous attempts by Searsex to console her and convince her to wed him. After what she had done, did she deserve to experience love once more? After what she had done, would she be able to find her own salvation? After what she had done, could she find redemption for herself? She was unaware, however, she was certain of one thing. She would do whatever it took to have her own salvation, redemption, or even the opportunity to atone for her past transgressions. She would be more than happy to become a stray devil for the rest of her life. She would be happy to become someone's slave for all eternity, even if it meant doing so. She would gladly accept the task of eliminating every angel and fallen angel on the planet. Never again would she allow her hesitation to deter her. Rias's group realized they had simply returned to where they had been the previous evening when everything around them was no longer black. The sword-field Sukoru's voice abruptly startled Rias and the others once more. "You once more, did you find the show enjoyable?" Sona turned to face the source of the voice and saw a battered Sukoru sitting on the grass, leaning against the flat side of a large rock-carved axe sword. He had a triumphant yet haughty smirk on his face, which reminded Sona of Genesis's famous haughty smirk. Rias narrowed her eyes and gave the blonde a menacing growl. "Don't you think you were the one who made those dreams and showed them to us?" As he began quoting, Sukoru ignored the obviously irate redhead and simply gazed wearily at the sunset sky. "Do you take off now, my friend? To a world that despises both of us? You only have a gloomy morrow ahead of you regardless of where the winds blow. Your wish, my friend, is the goddess gift and the source of life. Even if there are no promises for tomorrow, nothing will prevent me from coming back." Slowly getting to his feet, Sukoru stumbled toward what appeared to be a duplicate of Genesis's rapier and used it as a crutch to stay upright without looking back at Rias's group. Sukoru said in a somber but icy voice. "History, they say, never tells lies. However, those who wrote it are capable of lying. The truth is, it possible for something to be as cruel as fate? Humans, devils, angels, fallen angels, yokai, Ayakashi, and others have been working hard for millennia, and a lot more. Everyone claims to want to know the truth, however, they were unable to manage it. A devil killer and a one-winged fallen angel destroyed 38 pillars, or, more accurately, the result of one woman." With his back to Rias's group, Sukoru spat the word woman venomously once more. There is a lot of irony in life, do you not think so?" With a slight sarcastic grin on his face, Sukoru uttered those words. Sona said icily, "You still didn't answer the question." However, Sona's words were ignored once more as Sukoru carried on with his speech. In the world's veracity or deception, true or not, correct or incorrect, right or wrong, either dark or light, the boundary between them is so thin that it hardly exists at all. However, it's one of the primary factors that adds interest to this life." With a snap of his fingers, 5 magic circles materialized beneath Rias's and everyone else's feet, completely stopping them from moving. Sukoru turned back to Rias's group and spoke in a tone so icy that it sent shivers down Rias's spine. "This will be your final intrusion into this area. Enjoy the show from now on." Then, in front of Sukoru's eyes, every member of Rias's group disappeared. Sukoru looked up at the sky and laughed amusingly, shaking his head wearily. "Well, from now on, things will undoubtedly be interesting, man. I'm curious to see what Wataru will do once he finds out." Time skip. The night after, at the Kurenai Tendou Soma Arisato Hino Sugami household. A little nervous Rias sat in the large living room with her and Sona's peerage members, mainly Kiba and Rhea, who were talking to a happy Eiji, a slightly irritated Haruto, a lazy-looking Minato who was playing chess with Sona, and finally, a happy Yoko who was getting strange looks from Sona's peerage members, namely Yura, Momo, and Tomo. Kaneko was busy eating the donuts, much to Haruto's dismay, that Shuchi had made while said person was preparing dinner with Soji, Wataru and Daiki, on the other hand, weren't there when her and Sona's group arrived. The carnage from the previous dream was still vivid in Rias's mind, and she was frightened by what Atoya, Genesis, and Koritsugu Hadonia. The latter two had easily taken down the pillars from 72 to 34, while the former had easily brought her brother as Super Devil, no lesser, to his knees. Looking at Sona, Rias could have easily claimed that her rival was deep in thought, devising new plans to defeat Minato in chess. Up until now, Sona's side had been completely destroyed by Minato, who was on a winning streak. Arizato Minato, 4. Versus Sona Citri, 0. Knight is being promoted in checkmate. Minato uttered idly as Sona leaned back in her chair, exhausted, defeated once more, mumbling wearily. 5 consecutive. As she reflected on the conversation she had with Sona, Akeno, Kaneko, and Tsubaki, Rias sighed and questioned whether or not it had been a good idea to come here. Review. Now, Sona, what should we do? The most recent dream was. Rias rubbed her temples and said, damn, I don't even want to say it. We have no choice but to keep quiet about it, as much as I hate to say it. Sona complained. Damn that blonde, he's really good at messing my mind. Sona had held the belief that history never lies. For years, however, the most recent dream had completely shattered her faith. History is said to be truthful, however, those who wrote it are capable of lying. She thought about the blonde's speech again. She doubted what she had read for the first time in her life. But why should she be skeptical? Nothing supported the veracity of those dreams. However, a part of her insisted that what they had witnessed was accurate. There is a lot of irony in life, do you not think so? Sona pushed her thoughts to the back of her mind and turned to her rival and childhood friend. Sona hardly dared not add the suffix, kun, to Wataru's name. That aside about the invitation of Wataru K-san. Should we accept it or not? I recommend we accept, Akeno said. This may give us a chance to try to find out more clues about who Wataru-kun is. As Rias and Sona narrowed their eyes at Tsubaki, she sipped some tea from her cup and said thoughtfully, it's a nice idea but also a little risky. One thing for sure that I don't want to face Wataru-kun's bad side, especially after the last conversation between our group and his group. Tsubaki consistently referred to Kiba Yuto as Kiba-kun, but she called Wataru by his name. Akeno said gleefully as her voice became perverted and a sadistic smile spread across her face. While I must admit that time he terrified me, but I can't deny that he made me feel so hot and wet with his ultimate ruler aura, so I don't really mind facing his bad side again. Fufufufu. As Kaneko stopped eating her chocolate bar, she said blankly, Ero senpai. Recalling the candidates for her and Sona's peerage, Rias said, oh, right. I almost forgot. So we all agree that I will get Hyodo-kun and you will get Genshiro-kun, right Sona? Yeah, but I think we should hurry. This morning I just met a student goes with the name Amano Yuma and I have a bad feeling about this girl, said Sona glumly. End of flashback. Rias was startled back to reality when Akeno asked, Eiji-san, who are these people? As her curiosity overcame her, Rias, Kaneko, Sona, Tsubaki, and the other women aside from Aoko and Yoko rose from their zabuton, or Japanese cushion seat, and approached Rias's queen. Glancing over Akeno's shoulder, Rias saw that her queen was holding a small album, with 2 pictures on the pages Akeno opened. Wataru stood in the center of the first one, blushing wildly and smiling nervously, which Rias and the others thought was adorable. However, as they looked at the other individuals encircling Wataru in the picture, their eyes gave off a menacing gleam. An abashed blonde girl was gaping at the brunette, a busty redhead in a black military suit with red eyes and an eye patch covering her left eye, and a brunette with amethyst eyes pressing her breasts seductively against Wataru on her right side. On Wataru's left side were a young woman with black eyes and hair pulled back into a ponytail who was leaning against him and grinning contentedly. A fiery redhead who was pumping her fist into the air. Kaneko growled at the redhead for some strange reason, which greatly amused Rias and Akeno. And, lastly, a girl with pink eyes and waist-length black hair and a white girl with dark pink eyes who were lacing onto Wataru's waist. Last but not least, a curvaceous girl with dark red eyes and long black hair stood behind Wataru, pressing her assets against Wataru's back while wearing a devilish grin that oddly irritated Rias, Akeno, Tomo, and Yura. There were only 2 people in the second picture. A very adorable 5-year-old girl with pink eyes and dark brown hair tied in 2 small braids was crouching next to a smiling Wataru beneath a blooming sakura tree, laughing and jumping with excitement. The young girl was wearing a yellow jacket with a lion head-like hood, a yellow bell on the neckline, a blue skirt, blue and gray stockings, and red shoes, while Wataru was dressed in blue jeans, a white long-sleeve shirt, and his typical brown muffler. In addition, She carried two adorable glove puppets, a green snake on her left hand and a red dragon-like puppet on her right, as well as a tiny white shoulder bag that resembled a goat. "Ah, they are our friends when we were in our old school, Kawakami High. Ah, happy days," said Eiji as he pointed to the second image, "and this is our little chimera, Emi-chan Kurenai, Emi Wataru's daughter." The female's first response was a thick, long silence as Haruto mentally counted to 3, 2, 1 and Nani. Even Minato, who was wearing headphones, had to cover his ears with his hands due to the loud cry coming from Rias's group. Tomo stammered, "Do dog daughter." After hearing this news, feeling as though everything had fallen apart. Upon closer inspection, she noticed that the young girl's eyes resembled those of the pink-eyed girl who was draping Wataru's waist in the first image. Her thoughts began to chant, "Tell me this is a joke. Please tell 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 me this is a joke. Please." She prepared herself for the worst when Rias and Akeno heard this. Their hearts clenched for strange reasons. Aoko gave the guests a strange look and stated bluntly, "You didn't hear it wrong. She is Wataru's daughter. She was adopted by Wataru 1 year ago while Soji was chosen as her godfather." To the annoyance of Sona, Aoko, and, surprisingly, Rias, there were a lot of sighs of relief from the guests as Aoko finished, mainly from Sona's peerage. Thankfully, they soon returned their focus after hearing Yura's question. Haruto-senpai, if you don't mind me asking, well, why is Kato-san and Wataru-senpai not present when we came?" In front of an enraged Kaneko, Haruto said curtly as he triumphantly munched the last donut before Kaneko could take it, causing the small girl to glare at him. "That sword maniac went to pick up Emi-chan and his haha, formal word for mother in Japanese, to have dinner with us." Regretfully, before Haruto could complete "Tadaima, I'm home," in Japanese. As the guests finally processed what Haruto had just said, the sound of giggles in Wataru's voice reverberated throughout the hallway. Wataru's mother and adopted daughter stopped by for dinner. All of the female guests, including Kaneko, quickly fixed their hair, clothes, and postures in just 2 seconds, in front of Eiji's amused expression, Minato's, and Haruto's narrowed eyes. This speed could easily compete with Haruto's when he literally ate all of the donuts after 2 days without touching one, or after a tiring mission. After a short while, the living room's shoji opened, revealing Wataru grinning and a contented Emi wearing the same attire as the picture. At last, the most significant person emerged. The last individual was a stunning but stern-looking woman who was slightly shorter than Wataru and in her late 30s. She had light, soft blonde hair tied in a bun with a blue ribbon, emerald eyes, and a slim build. She is wearing a long blue skirt, black stockings, and a white long-sleeve shirt with a blue ribbon tie. The most significant aspect of this woman was her aura, which exuded elegance and royalty. "You're late," Yoko said softly. Wataru gave them a small bow and said, "Ah, gomen ne, Minna," with his typical weary smile. "Anyway, welcome all of you to our humble house. This is my adopt daughter, Kurenai Emi." Emi shouted, "Roar, I'll bite you in the butt, eh? Oops, not, roar, hee hee hee." It was an odd but happy greeting. Following Emi's exclamation, a dense silence descended upon the living room as Haruto counted in his head once more 3, 2, 1. As the female guests swarmed around Emi-chan, they completely forgot about the second person standing next to Wataru and exclaimed, "Kawaii." Rias couldn't resist pulling Emi-chan into an embrace while rubbing her cheek against Emi-chan's puffed cheeks. Emi-chan pouted, "I'm not cute," and gave them the most menacing glare she could manage. The female gave her another round of, because the glare only made Emi-chan appear much cuter. Wataru laughed at the guest's response and cleared his throat loudly, drawing their attention right away. However, they instantly froze in place as they realized that Wataru was accompanied by someone else, who just so happened to be. The blonde woman with an old English accent remarked, "It seems that you ladies are getting along with my adopted grandchild quite well. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Arturia Pendragon and I'm Wataru's mother. It's a pleasure to meet all of you," she said in a tone that was both stern and indifferent. She was Wataru's mother by coincidence. 50 minutes later, following a brief introduction, they were all seated in the spacious living room, savoring a substantial Japanese-style meal prepared by Soji and Shuchi with an awkward environment. The word that was hardly present in Rias's lexicon was shame. She could sleep in bed nude and, if she so desired, show Wataru her breasts, which she didn't mind at all, in order to make him blush and become agitated due to his teenage hormones. Hell, she wouldn't even bat an eyelash if she went for a stroll in public wearing nothing but the cutest bikini. However, Why was she feeling so ashamed? What had gone wrong with her? Why in the world did she feel shy now when she had never been shy before? Perhaps in her heart, she wanted to impress Wataru's mother, but hugging Arturia's grandchild and rubbing her cheeks against them as if they were Rias's personal teddy bear didn't win Arturia over. Nevertheless, Rias began to mentally thank all the Mao for not making fun of him in front of Wataru's mother. Rias stopped playing with her tempura and looked at the other diners when she blushed angrily. The sadist queen sat in Seiza with her back straight and a gentle smile on her face, and Akino's Yamato Nadeshiko aura seemed to be much stronger than usual as they ate the dinner slowly. Sona and Tsubaki all had serene faces, but Rias could tell they were also anxious based on their tense movements. Yuto and Kaneko were eating in silence. All of Sona's peers were eating, looking at the blonde woman with a nervous expression on their faces. The host, Minato, was eating as sluggishly as usual. Haruto had a frown on his face while he was eating. Soji was eating with grace and elegance. She didn't fully understand what Eiji and Shuchi were discussing about Nato while they were eating. Aoko was eating as if she were an automaton, automatically putting each bite in her mouth after swallowing the previous one. Wataru was eating contentedly, but every now and then she would feed Emi-chan, who was pouting and acting like a child because she wasn't allowed to make messes when around something that might take a long time to completely wash off. As Yoko pulled Emi-chan to her and sat the young girl on her lap, Emi-chan pursed her lips and poked her tongue at the kitsune, who simply smiled at the child. The young child folded her arms and began pouting once more. After a few more unsuccessful attempts, Rias couldn't help but feel envious of what she saw. Although she was unaware of the nature of the bond between Wataru-kun and Yoko, she could see that the two of them, along with Emi-chan, would make the ideal family that Rias had always imagined as a child. However, she ended up getting married to a Phoenix womanizer through an arranged marriage. Talk about how unfair life is. And then, for no apparent reason, Rias began to see visions in which she took the place of Yoko as Rias held Emi-chan while her Wataru-kun fed her and the young girl giggled contentedly in Rias' lap. What the devil? What on earth is the source of that thought? Rias stopped the vision and tried to force it from her thoughts. As she looked in the direction of the woman she wished to impress, she couldn't help but be taken aback and in awe of the blonde. She consumed so much food in such a quick, elegant, and graceful way that Rias and the other guests still found it difficult to accept that they weren't experiencing a hallucination. Gauchisu-sama. Rias quickly followed, but the chorus from the other brought her back to reality. A steaming teacup was placed in front of each person after the tables had been cleaned, which took around 20 minutes. Wataru cleared his throat, took a sip from his cup, and calmly said, "Did you all enjoy the dinner?" "Very much, Wataru-kun," Akeno said, grinning broadly, "and I can say that Shinra Fuko Kaichu here is jealous with Tendo-san's and Sugami-san's cooking." After eating Soji's and Shuchi's food, Tsubaki had no chance to impress Wataru with her cooking abilities, so she said in defeat, "I hate to admit this, but both of your cooking skills are far better than me. It feels like a whole new level compared to my skill. I want to impress Wataru-kun, but why?" And I started calling him by his first name. At what point? Tsubaki's eyes widened as she thought. "Nah, it's not really a big deal. My cooking skills still need to be improved more. Just keep practicing and you can easily surpass me, Shinra-san," Shuchi said, grinning and dismissively waving his hand. As he poured himself another cup of tea, Soji remarked, "My Oba-chan said, each meal only happens once in your life, so make each one the most important." Rhea said, "I also want to thank you for this excellent meal," in her customary calm and courteous manner. "And it's a pleasure and honor to meet you, Pendragon-san." Your name is Kusaka Rhea, right? Honestly, I don't know why, but when I first saw you along with that blue-hair girl and black-hair girl with ponytail Yura Tsubasa and Himejima Akeno, correct?" said Arturia as she glanced at Yura and Akeno. Yura bowed her head nervously and said, "Ah, yes. I mean yes, I am." She secretly hoped that her rambling wouldn't turn off her crush's mother. With a radiant smile on her face, Akeno said, "Yes, Pendragon-san, please. Just call me Akeno." Himejima is a bit mouthful, as she instinctively straightened her back into the ideal Seiza position. Arturia acknowledged with a nod and went on, "Yes, as I am saying, when I first saw you three, I don't know why, but I couldn't help but have a good expression of you three." This caused Rhea and Yura to blush intensely. Yura's chibi was dancing joyfully in her head, and Akino's face briefly displayed a shy but proud smile as she bowed her head in gratitude. Nevertheless, the other female gave them envious glances as a result. "Anyway, thank you for your compliment." When Emi-chan eventually managed to break free from Yoko's embrace and climb onto Wataru's lap, sit there, and begin playing with her glove puppet, Wataru abruptly said, "Oh, I almost forgot. Rias and Sona, have your group handled Razkasa?" "Yes, but still, why didn't you just finish him after causing so much damage?" Moreover, how did you know that he was a stray? Sona said, grimly nodding at Wataru. Wataru raised his left eyebrow and asked, Era? When I and Sona came to the southern part, we found Razkasa in a warehouse but in a very, very critical state. Every bone in his body was literally broken into pieces and his mind was broken to the point that the stray devil Razkasa we met was no more than an empty shell that kept murmuring, coffin. Rias grumbled. Coffin. Huh. Wataru chuckled lightly as he turned to face the sluggish blue-haired adolescent who had been closing his eyes and listening to music in silence since the conclusion of dinner. Oi Minato, it's your question to answer, Wataru said. My choice maybe was a little bit overkilled. A quiet moment Rias questioned, so it's your answer? Your choice was a little bit overkilled? Yes, Minato replied before returning his headphones to his ears. Who is this guy? Rias thought incredulously. He appeared to be a quiet, uneducated, and indolent man who only cared about himself from the outside, but he had stated that his decision to defeat the stray devil had been a little overkill. However, she recalled that her brother had once called one of the four Satans, Fulbium Asmodeus, a lazy man. She would have to accept the response, it seemed for now. Sona cautiously questioned, anyway, what is your real reason to invite us to have the dinner? With a hint of humor, Wataru asked, is it inappropriate to invite you to join us for dinner? We have only known you and your group for roughly a week. We know nothing but your names, Sona replied dryly. On some aspects, we are still strangers to each other, yet you invite us to have dinner with you, especially after our meeting the day before. What is your reason? Wataru ignored Sona's question and held his little girl in his arms while Emi-chan yawned sweetly. It seems it's time to go to bed, my little chimera, he said. If Arturia hadn't been staring at Rias in her protective grandparent mode, Rias would have jumped at the young girl to give her a teddy bear hug and wouldn't let her go. Phoo. I'm not sleepy, Papa. I don't want to yawn. Go to sleep. Nevertheless, Wataru curled up like a kitten and began snoring softly, and Emi-chan began to snuggle into her embrace. Wataru got up and turned to face his guests, holding Emi-chan in his arms. Since tomorrow is a day off, you can stay here for the night if you want, and I will tell you the reason. Yoko-chan and Aoko-chan. Can I entrust you too with my Ka-san and the guests? Yoko and Aoko kissed Emi-chan on the forehead and said, don't worry about it, Wataru-kun, just take a good care of her. Aoko agreed with the kitsune, saying, she's right Wataru-kun, just take your time with Emi-chan. You haven't met her for a week and now you should spend more time with her. Although the kitsune's lack of shame reminded her of a certain shameless brunette from Wataru's former school, Yoko's compassion was another reason why Aoko thought highly of her. Wataru nodded, opened the shoji in the living room without a sound, and walked away, leaving his guests to gaze at his back with conflicted feelings. Kato Daiki grinned at the 10 unconscious devils on the ground as he pulled out his dinner, which was a bottle of genmaicha made by Soji and a box of makanuchi prepared by Shuchi, and began to eat. Daiki remarked, you're late, old hag, as Yukari emerged from a gap. As she summoned 10 paper talismans and slapped each one on the nape of each devil's neck, Yukari said menacingly, watch your tongue, Teme. The talismans vanished without a trace after sinking beneath the devil's skin in a matter of seconds. Phoo, it's done. It's lucky that they haven't reported anything to there. They will remember nothing relates to Wataru-kun and his group, as well as ignoring my Wataru-kun's presence. My Wataru-kun surely is a genius, as he realized that there is no way 2 heiresses of 2 clan would be in charge of this territory without protection. Wataru-kun will be very pleased about what I did for him, gushed Yukari as he narrowed his gaze. Daiki would use the terms mastermind and manipulative to characterize Yukari. Gaia and Alaya could easily see her superhuman intelligence as a danger to Akasha. She claimed to love Wataru, but based on Daiki's observations, she typically loved other people the way someone would love a tool they own. Wataru chose to believe the gap Yukai even though Daiki himself told him this information. With a mocking tone, Yukai snapped her paper fan shut and turned to face Daiki, who was sipping his genmaicha. I have finished my part, thief. Now, can you please be a gentleman and bring these guys back to where you captured them? I have to go to see the missing ace. Have fun. The ace is missing. What exactly are you going to do, Gap Yukai? As he swallowed the last of his genmaicha, Daiki thought. Unknown place. A humanoid figure standing on the grassfield sighed as it gazed sorrowfully at the waning moon in the night sky. A close examination revealed that the figure was, in fact, a slender, feminine girl with 2 large black cat ears on top of her head, fair skin, short black hair, and dark blood-red eyes. She wore black high sandals, white stockings, and a short violet kimono that showed off her shoulders. She also wore a small crimson leather neck strap around her neck and a vintage pocket clock on her obi. The girl sighed again and began to sing, remembering a certain blonde. Who are you? What's your name? I'm Kurihime Kiyoshi Kurihime. I'm Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto. Oh, don't tease my ears, Naruto-kun. I just can't help it, Haim-chan. You looks just so cute with these ears. Really? Of course. Why would I lie to you? You're one of my first two friends. I will never tell a single lie to you. Where exactly are we going, Haim-chan? Here it is. Look, Naruto-kun. The sakura tree is blooming. Wah, it's so beautiful, just like you, Haim-chan. Really? Of course, Haim-chan, it's beautiful just like you. What happened to you, Naruto-kun? It's okay, Haim-chan, just another beating. Just another. Tell me who did this to you. Don't worry, Haim-chan, it will heal. Naruto-kun, I'm sorry. No, it's okay, Haim-chan, I understand. Sob, Naruto-kun, sob. Shish. Please don't cry, Kurihime. Don't worry, Haim-chan, I will be fine. Sob, Naruto-kun, sob. I promise that sob, that we will meet each other again, sob, and I will always sob, wait for you, sob, eternally, if I must, sob, sayonara, Naruto-kun. A tear rolled across her face as she silently whispered while gazing at the setting moon.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.